Yo, what's good, Shinobi Nation? Welcome back to Just a Shinobi, the home of the craziest Naruto what ifs. Today we're jumping into part 5 of What If Naruto Has Chance for a Prophecy? So strap in, because things are about to get explosive. If you're new to the channel, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter, and share this video with your whole ninja squad. And of course, drop your theories in the comments. Your support is what keeps this shinobi grinding. Chapter 20. Inside the Snake Pit. Naruto immediately shook the icy hand from his shoulder when he felt solid ground under his feet again, twisting to the side. However, his graceful movement faltered as he bumped into a long wooden table slumping under papers, files, scrolls, flasks, and an insurmountable number of various glass vials filled with colorful liquids. Naruto's heart rate increased as he received a sudden rush of adrenaline when his eyes met with an unidentifiable creature's body in a big glass cylinder, motionlessly floating in a yellowish liquid. Still jumpy around me, I'll take that as a compliment. Where are we? He wanted to ask the fox in his mindscape, but the question slipped out from his mouth aloud as he turned around to face the Sannin. In one of my laboratories under Konoha, Orochimaru answered casually while he motioned toward a door at the end of the room. Just play along, remember the plan we discussed. Naruto narrowed his eyes but followed the Sannin to the next room, which contained the same site. Only one thing was different: there was a metal examining table at the back of the room. The laboratory was different from what Naruto originally had imagined of the snake's nest, where the man had done his nasty experiments with Yamato Taicho and countless others. It was absolutely nothing like he had expected. The place was clean like a hospital instead of a dirty cave, the walls covered with white tiles. The most suspicious things were the dissected animals soundlessly floating in some kind of liquid. He couldn't find any bodies hanging from the ceiling, or cells holding wailing captives. Nor could he see any blood stains in the room. It was spotless. However, he could still smell the faint, metallic scent of the crimson-red liquid. His eyes drifted to the left part of the room, where the smell was the strongest, and he spotted a large freezer next to the wall. A half-smile appeared on Sannin's face as he followed Naruto's gaze. He slowly walked to the freezer and opened it to reveal hundreds, maybe even 1,000, neatly labeled small vials containing the aforementioned red essence. Blood samples, mostly from Fire Country. They're not that hard to gather. Shinobi have a tendency to bleed a lot. Naruto nodded at the explanation. However, he didn't know exactly why. The hair on the back of his neck had been on high alert ever since he had set foot into the lab, and despite it really looking like a normal hospital lab, it unnerved him like nothing else before. This wasn't good. He had thought the snake would bring him to the place where he was doing his questionable experiments, filled with evidence against him. If he acted now, he would be hunted down as a murderer. We have to find evidence before we can do anything. Act according to the plan, but don't let him do anything too suspicious. It seemed Kurama had come to the same conclusion. Like what? Even the way he breathes is suspicious. Like give you a shot or anything like that, you idiot. You somehow managed to trick my senses. No one has been able to sneak up on me. Naruto presented the question that had been bothering him from the very beginning. An annoyed snort bubbled out from the back of Orochimaru's throat. I'm one of the Sannin foolish little boys. I could sneak inside a Kage summit and sit down next to your brother or Sarutobi-sensei impersonating one of the leaders, and they would have no clue that it was me. Not even my naive, aging teacher would notice it. I've been fooling this whole village for months, and you think that tricking you, of all people, is impossible? The snake raised an eyebrow. You are more arrogant than I first thought. The blonde narrowed his eyes into slits, teeth clenched together to restrain himself from simply kicking the Sannins, but now in his annoyance. Indeed, the snake was absolutely right. He acted arrogantly, too overconfident in his own skills. He had been acting like a real idiot. Something he thought he had grown out of over the years. At least most of it. The pale man eyed the teen in front of him, waiting for a reply, but when none came he shrugged and motioned toward the back of the lab. Torikoku-in, lay down there. Naruto slowly walked toward the metal examining table where Orochimaru pointed, but he leaned against it instead. I will stand, thanks. And no straps or shots. If you want a blood sample, I will give it to you by my own hand. Jumpy and paranoid. What do you think I will do to you? Naruto didn't answer, only narrowed his eyes in his suspicion, and Orochimaru let it be, as in the end shrugged and handed over a vial to him. Fill at least half of it with blood. Naruto obeyed, slicing his palm open, letting the crimson liquid flow freely into the vial. His actions were followed by Orochimaru's hungry gaze. It isn't healing as fast as I once saw, the snake remarked, eyeing his still open wound, waiting for an answer that never came. I take it you can control your healing rate. I'm curious. Will your body reject a transplanted organ? Could you grow back a severed limb? Or an eye, for example? So many possibilities. Orochimaru mused, his eyes sparkling with a hungry light. Naruto didn't open his mouth to answer, however the question left him dumbfounded. Could Kurama actually do it? There is a slight chance, but I don't advise you to try it. I've never had to do anything like that. Like I would seriously try it. Geez, I was just musing. I also need tissue samples. Naruto raised an eyebrow questioningly, and then glanced down to his still open wound and back to the Sannin, who rolled his eyes. Hair will be fine for now. The Chunin nodded and handed over a small blonde tuft obediently. While the snake turned around with his samples, Naruto's experienced fingers trailed to the bottom of the ice-cold examining table. When he found the right location, he stiffened, and a slight, almost unnoticeable amount of nature's and his own chakra traveled from his fingertip toward the metal surface, to sketch a miniaturized, ink-black seal on it. A small, easy, but very useful trick he found in one of Jiraiya's old scrolls at Mount Myaboku. It was a small tracing seal which could be sensed only in Sage mode, so when he finally got out of here he would be able to locate it from a safe distance. His eyes widened when the snake suddenly stopped and glanced back over his shoulder with a puzzled expression on his face, then it slipped into an amused smirk. Well. Messing with nature's energy isn't for kids. It seems there's more to you than I first thought. There goes our plan, Kurama muttered in his mindscape, and a sheepish smile appeared on Naruto's face. The feeling is mutual. The snake grimaced at the oblique offensive words, and put the vial away before turning around to march to the tense teen. His arm moved to grab his cheeks, but Naruto was faster. With one graceful twist he was behind the Sannin with a cocky smile on his face. No touching, snake face. An angry grimace replaced the previous amusement in Orochimaru's expression, and he turned to face the blonde time traveler while folding his arms across his chest. His eyes traveled along Naruto in a new, calculating manner. After one long and tense silent minute, the snake started to chuckle. My. There goes my theory. I thought you were made artificially in a lab to assassinate Minato-kun, and that your regeneration ability was a symptom of the mixture of increased body growth and Uzumaki genes. A brainless vessel with inserted memories, skills, and planted orders. And your addiction to peace was only to gain Minato's and my foolhardy teammates' trust. I really thought that your abilities and techniques were just implanted to have the skills to get rid of Minato-kun. But using senjutsu isn't something which can be simply implanted. It requires long years of experience, and not to mention spiritual peace. And I doubt it was Jiraiya who taught it to you. Naruto tilted his head to the side and dismissively folded his arms across his chest, letting out an angry snarl. I'm not some kind of freaky clone or something, Databeo. I'm really Minato's relative. Only your sick and wicked mind would come up with a theory like that. The snake tilted his head to the side, observing the blonde Chunin with increased curiosity. Then what are you? Why would I tell you anything? Naruto's body stiffened to gather nature's energy, but Orochimaru jumped into action before he could finish the process. A snake shot forward from under his sleeve to bite Naruto's neck and to distract him, but a moment later, the snake's head dropped to the ground and disappeared with a puff of smoke as the blonde severed its head with razor-sharp wind chakra. Naruto's eyes widened when the small amount of senjutsu collected this time expanded his senses enough that he could feel the people on the other side of the wall not 10 meters away from where they stood. At least a dozen weak people were placed in small groups, maybe cells in the hidden room. What's behind this room? Another set of snakes shoot forward, utilizing the frozen and shocked state of the blonde to clamp down on his arms, neck and torso, restraining him from every small movement, while something also keeps him from gathering nature's energy, or using his own chakra. Now I'm pissed off. Naruto let out a snarl and he was about to call for Kurama's chakra when a fling of a tail in his mindscape stopped him. Wait a little bit. Let's see what he wants from us. I'm curious. In the next blink, Kurama found himself with a dumbfounded Naruto. Curious? You are curious? The emotionless mask was gone, the blonde's face moved into the perfect mixture of disbelief, anger, and irritation. Let me get this straight. At least 24 snakes are currently biting into my flesh, and you are telling me to wait, because you are curious? The fox smirked. Just relax. He is just a small fly. We are way stronger than him if we're using our full power. We need more information before we kick his ass. The blonde growled, but obeyed as Orochimaru's sinister voice stabbed the silence. Well, it seems I have to stop toying with you. It's a shame. I wanted to play with you a little bit more. But once I figure out your healing abilities, you will be a perfect subject for my experiments. Maybe I'll finally be able to transplant a Sharingan into a new body. A sinister smile spread across his face, then he turned around and with one flick of his hand, they disappeared from the room and reappeared in the next one with one quick shunshin. As your eyes ran through the surroundings, noting the cages and bars carved into the hard surface. Then they were locked on the site behind the iron bars. Hospital beds were lined up, each of them holding a captive. A child, a woman or a man under heavy sheets and straps. Everything was silent around them. The people currently occupying the prisons were either too weak or frightened to move. Instead, they were hiding at the back in the shadows or they were motionless under their sheets. However, one pair of weary eyes flared open for a moment before the small head dropped back from exhaustion. Don't be concerned. It's nothing personal. The Sannin chatted casually and sent a small, almost sincere smile and slowly walked out from the prison, tearing away Naruto's gaze as he was dragged out and they entered a giant cave. Orochimaru dragged his captive all the way to the opposite side, toward another passage. Naruto strained his endurance over his limits, desperately trying to fight against his urge to kick the irritating pale shinobi to the other world. An idea popped up, finally averting his previous thoughts. Minato is going to look for me and find this place eventually. Don't be so sure about that. We are deep inside the Hokage monument. Nobody will hear you, smell you, nor sense your chakra. I could even put a bijou in here, and your brother would never even take notice of it. If there wasn't a snake around his neck, Naruto would tilt his head to the side questioningly. Do you think he is bluffing? Kurama shrugged, but a sinister smile spread across his fluffy face in his pleasure. A bijou? Naruto asked curiously. The Sannin chuckled, stopped in the middle of the giant cave and turned to face the young boy, pointing his finger high toward the ceiling. With one movement of his other wrist, the snakes around Naruto's neck moved, forcing his body to move independently from his will, and his head followed Orochimaru's finger. The Chunin's eyes widened. He already saw something similar to this once when he was training with Killer Bee on that creepy island. He hadn't had a clue as to what those were at the time, however he was smarter this time. Well, at least a little. Azure eyes were glued in the pattern, tracing the lines, curves, and symbols. Ancient seals were carved all along the high ceiling. Countless numbers of barriers were layered on top of each other and tied together, creating a thick layer of chakra concealing seals. Orochimaru left the boy lost in his own small world, his amber eyes observing the blonde with a satisfied smile on his face, watching as realization struck the boy. This place is ancient. It was here even before Konoha was founded. No one else even knows about its existence. This place was used to tame one of the bijou in secret. Naruto forced his gaze back to the Sannin as much as the snakes let him, with a wondering expression on his face. A sinister smirk spread across Orochimaru's features, waiting for the blonde to become frightened when he finally realized that this would be the end. But his smile suddenly slipped into a suspicious glare when a wide, foxy, but altogether satisfied smirk appeared on Naruto's face instead of fear. Then the blonde opened his mouth, and his eyes sparkled with an odd light. Perfect. Minato glanced at his beautiful betrothed with a soft smile on his face, watching as Kushina bit into the food. Even the sauce currently sliding toward her chin from her soft lips looked cute. It didn't mess up her perfect image. Kushina ate with closed eyes, but her eyebrows soon started to twitch with irritation. Why are you staring at me? Minato didn't answer, only his smile widened a bit. Kushina sent a suspicious gaze but in the end let it go and glanced up to the clock on the wall and sighed. Torika's late. I think he went out for ramen with that IWA genin. Kushina raised a surprised and confused brow. A genin from IWA having ramen with a leaf shinobi? Geez, the world's been turned upside down. Minato let out a loud chuckle and his previous smile widened into a grin in the end. Yeah. Who thought this could ever happen? But nothing is impossible if he is involved. You should have seen Kushina. He broke the walls between the nations like it was nothing. Minato snapped his fingers to punctuate his words. Their soft chuckles filled the room for a long minute until it finally died down. Kushina. When the exams are over, let's have the wedding. What do you think? We dwelled long enough as an unofficial pair. Let's make it finally official. Kushina's wide smile was the only answer he needed. The rest of the dinner went smoothly, sharing small, knowing smiles and quick kisses until the last beams of the late winter sun disappeared behind the Hokage monument. Kushina stretched her arm to place a plate back to its place, when she suddenly stiffened, the power disappearing from her body, letting the plate slip out from her graceful fingers, and it reached the hard surface of the floor with a harsh and loud crash as it shattered into a dozen pieces. Minato rushed inside the room, his eyes widening at the scene, watching motionlessly on the edge of panic as Kushina grabbed her stomach and rolled up to ease away something. In the next blink he was next to her, his eyes filled with concern and worry. Kushina, what's the matter? The redhead gritted her teeth and squeezed her eyes shut in concentration as she answered. The fox. Something is wrong with it. It suddenly became restless. The seal is breaking? Is it hurting you? Kushina shook her head. No, it's still intact, it just feels odd. Like the fox is tapping on the inside of my stomach. Let me check it. The girl nodded and Minato gently picked her up and placed her on the couch. Experienced hands trailed above the now free design of the seal on her belly, but just the sight of it made Minato frown in his confusion. It was visible, like Kushina was continuously tapping into the fox's reserves. With a small amount of his own chakra, he let his senses spread inside the design, looking for any abnormality. But he found none. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes into slits, observing the grinning blonde boy surrounded by his summons, paralyzing his chakra reserves and also the ability to gather senjutsu. A small extra addition to their poison he himself developed in case he ever had to deal with Jiraiya. The boy's cocky expression didn't falter, and the snake's face moved into an annoyed grimace. He raised his other arm to finally erase that grin from that impertinent boy's face. But before he could trigger his next move, his summons restraining the boy disappeared in the next blink, shrouding the Chunin inside thick chakra clouds from his wide and surprised eyes. The clouds were in no hurry to dissolve in the motionless air around them. The confident voice of the boy suddenly stabbed the tension as it echoed back and forth from the walls of the giant empty cave. Bringing me here was an unlucky idea. But thanks anyway. The clouds slowly started to fade away, their puffy surface was gently illuminated with gold, just like the clouds in the rising sun. With a flicker of Naruto's wrist, wind chakra surged from his form, flushing away the last remains of the chakra-enchained mist, and the place around him perfused with golden light. It seems I don't have to hold back. Naruto sent a beaming grin to the frozen Sannin. Orochimaru's amber eyes widened to an unnatural size by his shock, his gaze locked on the golden chakra flames, the crimson-colored eyes and the dilated pupils. In the next moment, he shook off his temporary stasis and narrowed his eyes as he observed his opponent from a new angle. Soon, his sinister smirk was there again. Perfectly trained. So no new bloodline abilities or something like that. How disillusioning. But which one? The one tail has just been sealed into the Kazekage's youngest son, and you also managed to straighten the seal, based on my network. The 2 and 8 tails are at Kumo for certain. The Mizukage has the 3 tails in him, while the 4 and 5 tails vessels are still wandering around the nations, but I'm also confident that they are still alive. The 7 tails is participating in this very Chunin exam, while our Minato-kun plays with the 9 tails. The only one I know nothing certain of is the 6 tails. However, I heard the rumors that it belongs to Kiri. Orochimaru trailed off, observing Naruto as if he was some kind of fascinating puzzle which has to be solved. I never thought Kiri's scientists would ever reach this advanced level. A result of a brilliant transgenic experiment if I think about it. They were able to mix Uzumaki DNA in a living body, and as a joke of fate that it is Namikaze's long-lost brother, to create a perfect vessel for the 6 tails. Did you run away from the lab? Naruto grimaced and an irritated snarl bubbled out behind his grown canines. I'm not the result of some kind of fucked up experiment, you snake freak. And I don't house the 6 tails. You are tapping in the absolute wrong direction. The snake grimaced and shrugged. It doesn't matter. Once I'm finished with you, I'll have enough time to figure out what you are. Naruto narrowed his eyes as one of the snake's arms traveled behind his back and he felt a slight surge of chakra behind the Sannin. He didn't have to think about what he was doing because in the next blink Orochimaru flung into action, and with one jump, he gracefully landed in front of him in an elegant crouch. The pale man twisted his body to slam his open hand into his stomach. The tips of his fingers already shined with purple chakra, to seal away his tenant's power and make him unable to use any kind of chakra properly for a long time. Gojyo Fuin. 5 elements seal. The attack was quick, it was sudden, but Naruto's composure didn't falter. The seal was only centimeters from his stomach when a golden chakra arm surged from his torso, grabbing the Sannin's wrist and elegantly throwing him to the other side of the cave. By the impact of his pale body, the hard surface cracked and debris surged inside the cave. The echoing noise of landing debris filled the cavern almost immediately. With one more elegant movement of Naruto's wrist, a surge of wind cleared the debris and the smoke, revealing an angrily snarling Sannin. I won't let you do that this time. The snake rolled his head side to side to get rid of his irritation and slowly straightened himself to casually throw his long black hair behind his back, out of his sight, and narrowed his amber eyes. What do you mean by this time? Naruto received a mental slap from his fluffy tenant and a sheepish, embarrassed grin spread across his face. Nothing. With one last cocky grin, the blonde Chunin flung into action to pin the Sannin in an enormous taijutsu battle. Naruto sent a chakra-enchained fist toward the frowning pale man, who avoided the attack with one elegant twist. An annoyed growl left his lips, a chakra arm emerged from his back, to catch up with the pale man's fluid deflections. Their style was the perfect match for each other. While Orochimaru's movements screamed perfection and precision gained by practicing every single kata until they were flawless, Naruto's movements were the perfect opposite. There were only small flashes of 1 or 2 perfect stances. Most of his movements were made by pure instinct. While Orochimaru was the perfect, calm ocean in his movements, Naruto was the maelstrom he was named after. He was wild, unstoppable and unpredictable, leaving behind debris and destruction where he put a hand or foot. Be it the Sannin's body or simply the floor he touched. While the snake used perfect stances to avoid an attack, Naruto simply tried to break through his defense with brute power, not caring about his own openings. I want to have a piece of him also. Naruto snorted and a clone popped into existence in the next moment, his features already moving something more animalistic until a wide and sinister smirk appeared on his face. He is all yours, furball. Kurama had sent an annoyed glare in reply, before his attention snapped back to the heavily breathing pale man. Orochimaru the Snake Sannin. I long for this moment for a long time. I'll have a sweet time killing you slowly. Naruto grimaced and stepped to the side to slip away from another attack of the Sannin, who almost immediately split his attention between the two opponents. The Bijou, I assume? His only answer was a widening smirk. Kurama immediately flung into action. The clone's nails extended into razor-sharp claws and he dashed toward the snake, who jumped back to avoid the insanely fast attack. Golden chakra clouds started to bubble around the clone and Naruto decided that it would be best for him if he simply stepped to the side and let Kurama blow off some steam which had been accumulating since they had arrived in the past. The golden chakra slowly faded away to give place to the slowly gathering nature's energy. He watched as 3 tails came to life behind his clone, currently controlled by Kurama. The smirk moved into a dangerous and satisfied grimace as power surged through Kurama's borrowed body. Claws slashed toward the Sannin with increased speed, inking thin, crimson-red lines on pale skin, tearing away pieces of cloth. A defensively raised kunai shattered in 2 after one slash. Another tail came to life between 2 attacks. The once animalistic clone of Naruto slowly disappeared and was replaced by a miniature version of Kurama. It was odd. The battle and the fox's movements were animalistic. They were primitive and barbaric. Each of his attacks screamed power and brute force. But somehow behind the rough surface it was still royal in an ancient way. Behind the beastly movements Naruto could also see graceful and fluid motions of a perfectly composed fast waltz. It was fascinating seeing Kurama's and Orochimaru's enormous battle. It was fast, it was simple, and it was deadly. There was no time for flashy jutsu between the lightning-fast strikes. It was sheer taijutsu. And the clone was still there, untouched, while the Sannin bled from countless small cuts and bruises. Naruto decided that Kurama had played long enough. He almost felt bored. However, before he could make a step further into the fight, something made him freeze in place and his eyes to widen. The golden chakra around Kurama slowly became orange with a red tint as two more tails came into existence. His expression became more and more furious than before. Slowly, the consciousness started to fade away from his friend's eyes as anger and fury took over its place. The chakra that once emitted life and warmth in the last year now felt menacing and evil like in the old times. An angry growl echoed in his own mindscape and a tug from his stomach kicked him out from his frozen state. It was Kurama in his own self. He struggled against his own instincts. A hint of long-felt animalistic anger flushed through Naruto's own mind from the ancient old bijou, sending chills down his back. Naruto, something is wrong. Dismiss that damn clone or he'll go nuts. Naruto nodded and raised his hands to make the necessary seal, and the clone popped out from existence with one last furious glance toward his original. What the hell? Naruto growled to himself. Don't use my full power until we figure out what the hell happened. Only in sage mode. The blonde nodded in agreement, already gathering nature's energy. Nothing could be heard beside Orochimaru's harsh breathing. The snake, utilizing the opening, ran through a long chain of hand signs between two breaths. Chakra smoke filled the cave, shrouding the bastard from blue eyes, but Naruto could still sense the drastically increased smell of reptiles. An annoyed grimace appeared on his face, when the dismissing smoke slowly started to reveal the scaled skin of a giant summon. I have to admit you caught me off guard, Toriko-kun. I never thought anyone would be that bold. Letting the bijou gain control over a clone. Even Uzumaki Kushina isn't as much of an idiot to do something as reckless as that. A deep growl bubbled out from the back of Naruto's throat as his mother's name slipped from Orochimaru's mouth. But before he could retort, the snake flung into action. The giant serpent rushed forward with insane speed, forcing Naruto to jump out of its way. It wasn't just any of his summons. It was Manda. The biggest, strongest, and the fastest. Naruto, biting on his thumb, smearing blood, ran through the hand signs of the summoning technique and slammed his palm onto the ground, only to receive a mental slap from his never-missing fluffy companion when nothing happened. Idiot. Naruto scratched his head sheepishly. His movements were followed by Orochimaru's narrowed and suspicious eyes. Yeah, it just slipped out of my mind, stupid time thingy. Naruto whispered into the air. Don't talk aloud. Naruto winced as Kurama barked out with a harsh voice. Now he was really missing his summoning contract so much he couldn't even describe it. Before he could continue his line of thought, Orochimaru got tired of his inner discussion with the bijou and sent a giant fireball toward the blonde teen, who easily jumped out of its way with an annoyed grimace on his face. Hey! Don't interrupt my discussion with you snake freak! Orochimaru narrowed his eyes on the top of Manda's head and flung into action one more time, not even bothering to retort. Debris flew across the cage as the summon's enormous body made connection with the surface where Naruto stood a moment before. The named blonde snorted and jumped up to join Orochimaru on his summon's head. The Chunin gracefully landed in a crouch. His azure eyes traveled up to the annoyed Sannin and jumped into action. He aimed a hit toward Orochimaru's spine, but he easily avoided his attack. Naruto grimaced when his next kick was also easily deflected, and that was the point when he felt as if the Sannin was also surrounded by nature's energy. It wasn't as defined as him, nor as Kabuto's back then, but it was there. He infused his senses with its help to deflect his attacks. It's time to move to some frog kumite, don't you think, Kurama? He grinned when his companion made an agreeing nod in his mindscape. He suddenly changed stance, his hand shot toward the widening eyes of the Sannin, who wasn't able to dodge. At least not the extended senjutsu. Nor his next punch and the series of kicks he sent immediately after the first one. It was somehow fascinating to see Orochimaru's struggle in his hands. He made up his mind suddenly and jumped down from Manda's head. Two clones popped into existence. The sound of the Rasen shuriken filled everything around them almost immediately as they formed it in no time. Sannin's eyes widened when the spinning ball of pure energy rushed toward him and his summon, not leaving any time to deflect. Millions of invisible razor-sharp chakra blades rushed toward Naruto's opponent with unstoppable speed. A second later, everything was shrouded by blinding white light as the technique exploded, eating away Orochimaru's form, together with Manda's. The cave was dead silent as the technique's squealing sound finally died down, but the enormous amount of chakra-filled smoke left by the giant summon still lingered in the motionless air. A wide and satisfied smirk appeared on Naruto's face when the smoke finally cleared and revealed a giant crater in the middle of it, where Orochimaru once stood. But before he could become cocky, a familiar and creepy chuckle bubbled out from the crater. The bloody form of Orochimaru slowly raised, the debris creaked under his foot, stabbing the offensive silence with every footstep. Did you really think that a boy like you could finish me off that easily? Me, the greatest of the Sannin? Naruto cocked his head to the side, hissing his answer behind his gritted teeth. Yeah. I did. Bastard. But I have to admit, you continuously caught me off guard. You are unpredictable. If Manda didn't shield me, I would be nothing more than a corpse. He flung his black hair behind his shoulders, out from his sight with a casual wave of his hand. It's a mistake I won't make once more. Orochimaru smirked. We will see. Naruto answered with a casual tone, and with a straight face, something he had picked up from his father, who always managed to push opponents over the edge. And it seems, by Orochimaru's suddenly angry grimace, he wasn't an exception. His expression slowly smoothened as the previous anger evaporated. Orochimaru smirked before he opened his mouth. I still got some ace up my sleeve, my child. In the next blink, Sannin's hand blurred by the insanely fast pace at which he was forming hand signs. And despite the fact that Naruto didn't hesitate even a second and rushed toward his opponent, this time he couldn't keep up with the speed. Yamada no Jutsu. Eight-headed serpent jutsu, he had to jump backward as Orochimaru finished preparing his technique, his form disappearing once again inside the white smoke which followed his jutsu. With a sudden rush from his palm, the smoke immediately cleared to reveal a giant white dragon-like thingy. Naruto's eyes widened. A giant, pure white serpent-like thing stood where Orochimaru once was, its scaled skin containing a countless number of spikes. He grimaced as he counted its heads. All of its 8 heads held razor-sharp fangs bigger than himself, and he could only compare their size to Kurama's own fangs. They were maybe even bigger. You know, Kurama, you said not to use our joint power, but I think we should put that agreement aside. He let out a relieved sigh when he felt Kurama's nod. They had to be careful. Whatever happened to the clone, it could happen to them also. Hopefully the fact that they were their originals and not a clone could prevent it. The giant cave fortunately held enough space for their fight as long as he didn't use a bijou bomb. He winced at the thought of what would happen if he accidentally shot a hole through the Hokage monument from the inside. He pushed those thoughts from his head and let the golden flames encompass his body once again as he dropped the last remains of nature's energy. But this time they didn't stop at the edge of his skin. It moved further and further until Kurama's complete form appeared from it, Naruto staying still on the top of his head. The enormous 8-headed serpent flung into action almost immediately. Claws and fangs tore into flesh and pure energy. Cuts and bruises appeared on Naruto's body by the enormous strength of the dragon god's attacks. Countless numbers of razor-sharp needles rushed toward his form from one of the heads, while the others threw, futon and one katon attack. He was barely able to dodge the Kuzunagi's blade rushing from one of the heads to stab through his heart, but it still gushed a long and deep cut on his side. Anger overwhelmed and blurred his senses just like before. Like the poise suddenly tilted to the wrong side. It was just like before the start of the war. Just like Kurama's old and tainted chakra. Naruto's eyes widened when realization hit him harder than one of Sakura's chakra-boosted punches. Kurama! I know what's happening to us. It's the other you. You told me that you had lost half of your chakra when you fought with Dad. Your other self-seen chakra is overwhelming us. His anger and his hatred is what we are feeling. They are somehow leaking toward us through Mom's seals and all those barriers. The giant form of Kurama suddenly froze between two attacks and glanced toward his companion and nodded in understanding. We have to finish this off as quickly as we can. Get serious and don't play around. Deal. Format 22. Naruto nodded and jumped to the head of Kurama again as soon as the bijou locked his opponent under him, pinning down his every head with one chakra arm for each. 8 clones popped into existence, rushing together with the original toward the pinned giant heads of the white serpent, carefully concentrated inky black balls already forming above their heads. In the next blink, the cave was once again shrouded in smoke and debris as the 9 small bijou dama connected with flesh and at once the summon disappeared. Kurama's chakra slowly faded away from existence together with his disturbing rage, back to the original, but this time Naruto didn't let his guard down. He patiently waited for the smoke to finally clear before he reached for nature's energy, and finally spotted what he was looking for. Another clone popped into existence, and the two blondes slowly approached the bloody and harshly breathing man laying motionlessly on the floor aside from his chest's fast, fluttering movement. Orochimaru was finally able to turn his head toward the sound of the footsteps for a second before his head dropped back to the ground. A wet but still menacing chuckle bubbled out from his mouth together with some blood, staining the ground under him more. A bijou with 9 tails and in the form of a fox frog kumite, and senjutsu training from Mount Myaboku, a fully developed Rasengan. You gave me so many new pieces for this fine puzzle. Orochimaru's voice was raspy, and Naruto could feel as he strained to not let it falter in the slightest by the pain. However, he didn't answer, he just stood there with his clone, watching the beaten, once proud Sannin. His injuries weren't life-threatening. At least, if he could get medical attention very soon, but he was obviously unable to move even his finger. Kushina's and Namake's brat's DNA. Your resemblance even to her, which everyone just overlooked and tossed to the side. Your sudden appearance involves a Sharingan and space-time ninjutsu. The Sannin closed his mouth, his eyes becoming foggy for a second, before he slowly opened his mouth again. Space and time. Time, Orochimaru murmured into the air, but his eyes flared suddenly with a greedy light. He slowly turned his head to glance up again. Only one question slipped from his lips. How? The blonde hesitated for a moment before he answered with a low tone, but his voice still sounded somehow relieved. I don't know, I fought with that bastard Uchiha. I wanted to seal him away, and the next thing I know I woke up here and now in the hospital. Naruto shook his head. It doesn't matter now. The bastard already figured it out, and somehow he couldn't suppress the urge to finally talk about it with someone. To confess. Even if it had to be Orochimaru. Do you want to go back? I can help you. Put this all to the side and I'll help you. Naruto quickly averted his gaze, his hands clenched into fists, his azure blue eyes flashed with crimson red by his sudden anger. You will do terrible things in the future. I won't let you go. I can't let you go. I can help you too. Naruto snapped his head back to the Sannin and spat out his words as if it was sour poison, interrupting the injured man. You killed and experimented on countless men and women. Even innocent children. On Yamato Taicho. You killed Sandaime. You tried to kill Jiraiya and Tsunade, me from time to time. It's because of you Sasuke defected. You pushed Kabuto to insanity, and if it wasn't for him and your damned Edo Tensei, we could have ended the 4th Shinobi War. If it wasn't for you and your damn technique, Madara would never have been resurrected. A satisfied smirk appeared on Sannin's blood-stained face. So it was Madara. So that old geezer finally managed to die. Anger and fury overwhelmed Naruto's mind once again, but it was his clone who grabbed Sannin and shook him. So you know he isn't dead. You know where he's hiding. Tell me. I've still got time before he brainwashes Obito. Orochimaru cocked his head to the side. Obito? You mean the dead last in Minato's team? Kakuku, oh the irony! Orochimaru's eyes suddenly widened and glanced toward the original. Tell me, did I reach my goal? Did I become immortal? Did I learn every jutsu in the world? Naruto's anger had risen to a new level, but it was once again his clone who shook the Sannin violently instead of his own self. Where is he? Orochimaru's eyes slowly moved to the clone and he smirked. If I get my answer, you will also get yours. And an equivalent exchange. Sannin's voice finally faltered as he gasped for air and a painful grimace flashed through his face. Tell me what I want to know and I will tell you what I can know about Madara. Naruto clenched his teeth and the clone dropped the Sannin to the ground. You will at least partially reach your goal. As far as I know, you have been able to transfer your consciousness into a new vessel. Into a new body. A wicked and almost insane smirk spread across Orochimaru's face, his expression turned into the mirror of utter ecstasy, and he started to laugh almost hysterically. Naruto waited impatiently until the laughter finally stopped by bloody coughing. I told you what you wanted to know. Now it's your turn. Where is Madara's hideout this time? The Sannin smirked and spat out some crimson liquid. Who said that I know where he is? I just knew that he wasn't dead. I found Hashirama's diary. I know he left his body there. He never had the courage to check the body. And I know his body disappeared. I just connected the dots. Naive little Torakukuin. Naruto gritted his teeth and turned on his heels to walk away, but the Sanin's raspy voice stopped him. What are you going to do now? I'm leaving. Aren't you going to kill me? I know your little secret. Naruto closed his eyes and answered without turning around. No one is going to believe you. You are a traitor. You are insane and obsessed with power. You will live. You will live a long life in a prison where you can think about your sins. And maybe one day, you will realize what you have done, and you will turn away from the darkness. Gigi and Jiraiya never give up on you, so I also won't. A shiver ran down Naruto's spine when he heard the snake's almost crazy chuckle. Cuckoo, I'm going to escape. No one is able to hold me back. I'm the strongest of the Sanins. I'm going to be immortal. I can reach my goal. Yet, a 17-year-old boy was able to kick your ass just now, while my teammate killed you in the future. When he was 16, you know you were pathetic. An angry growl filled the empty cave, soon followed by Orochimaru's hysterical voice with a hint of panic. You told me I was able to move between bodies. I was immortal. Naruto finally glanced over his shoulder. Immortal? Maybe. But not invulnerable. With this one last sentence, he slowly continued his walk toward the exit. Orochimaru's angry voice followed him the whole way. He was about to reach the entrance of the passage leading toward the cells to check up on the prisoners, when the Sanin's displeased shouting suddenly stopped after a loud snap. It was unnaturally loud in the silent cave as it echoed back and forth between the cliffs, reaching his sensitive ears countless times, making his hair stand almost painfully on end. He recognized that sound, but he almost felt too frightened to turn back, knowing what he would find. With the last remains of nature's energy still in him, he sensed Morokimaru's chakra slowly leaving his body. But it didn't disappear. Somehow it changed and morphed until it became one with nature. In the end, Naruto braced himself and slowly turned around. His clone's natural features were nowhere to be seen. Crimson-red dilated eyes and thickened whiskers greeted him, together with the limp body of the once fearsome and proud Sannin. Amber-colored eyes stared into the emptiness in disbelief. Kurama's stolen hands were still hovering over Orochimaru's broken neck. What have you done? Naruto whispered with wide eyes. What both of us knew was necessary. You just didn't have the stomach to do so. Kurama answered back in a low tone, eyeing as Naruto hesitantly took one step toward the already cooling body of the Sannin. But he stopped. He had already seen enough dead bodies. He didn't want to see one more. Even if it was Orochimaru. He let him live. He wanted him to live. He didn't want him to die. He just wanted to stop him, to lock him up forever in a dark cell. Kurama let out a sigh, and with one flicker of his borrowed hand, Orochimaru's body was covered with burning red flames, tearing into the dead flash, inferno burning away all the evidence. Naruto's hands squeezed into fists, and suddenly he turned and rushed toward his original goal to check on the prisoners when the smell of the burning body reached his nose. But he faltered in the middle of the passage and dropped to his knees when his clone disappeared and his memories returned. His stomach turned upside down, as the memory of the popping sound kept echoing inside his head. His clone's desperate struggle to get control when he realized what Kurama was about to do. The disgusting feeling between his fingers as the vertebra slipped to the side when it couldn't endure the force anymore, and the snapping sound again as it echoed thousands of times inside the empty cave, while Orochimaru's empty and foggy eyes stared back at him with surprise and disbelief. He couldn't fight off the urge. He emptied his stomach where he was, only able to stumble some hesitant steps away from the mess when he dropped to the ground once again and gratefully embraced the offered unconsciousness of his exhausted body to flee from the memories of his first kill. Minato paced back and forth in the living room, impatiently waiting for Jiraiya to finally step out of the room currently housing Kushina. He didn't know what could have happened to the seal, and he rushed for Jiraiya as soon as he realized it. But that perverted bastard ordered him to leave, insisting that he was disturbing him in his work. Finally Jiraiya stepped out from the room and the worried Hokage turned on his heels immediately, but his sensei's raised hand stopped him from bursting out of his questions. Kushina and the seal are okay. I've put another layer of surpassing seal over the existing ones, and it closed the fox's chakra flow completely. She is sleeping now. It won't bother her anytime soon. Minato let out a relieved sigh and dropped onto the couch, rubbing his eyes. What happened to the seal? Technically it is in perfect condition. Jiraiya sent a knowing smile to Minato and winked. Nothing serious. Just some natural reaction with females. She will tell you soon. Tell me what? Kushina has gained some weight, don't you think? Minato snorted furiously once again and stood up angrily. What are you talking about? Don't beat around the bush. And she is as beautiful as ever. But a hint of a blush betrayed the lie, making the Sannin grin knowingly again. The Hokage eyed the aging pervert for a second before he let out a defeated sigh. Okay. Maybe she gained just a little on her tummy. But if she caught even a hint of what I've told you, she would kill me. Jiraiya let out a low chuckle and shook his head. Oh, believe me, my friend. She won't bite off your head because of it. At least not now. Not until it becomes uncomfortable for her. You know, aqueous ankles, not sleeping on her stomach for months and so on. But you know, she'll get much bigger breasts for your pleasure, so it'll be worth it. Minato's confusion only grew bigger and bigger, and so did Jiraiya's smug grin. What the hell are you hinting at, old pervert? A grimace appeared on the toad's face. Geez. People around you tend to forget how you were sometimes, back before you become a hero. Everybody talks about you the same way, a prodigy, a rare genius that appears only once in a generation. Jiraiya trailed off for a second, before he shouted out. But I remember. For a genius you could be really dense occasionally when it wasn't about ninja stuff. For example with the ladies. It's good you've outgrown most of it. I remember when you were just a genin. You used to be as dense as a dead stone, until you reached puberty. If it's not about a jutsu or something. I hope it's nothing genetic. Kushina used to be the same. It could become prominent in your child. Minato raised an eyebrow, his azure blue eyes still observing his teacher suspiciously. And why would you be concerned about that suddenly? Jiraiya let out a sigh and shook his head, mumbling something incoherent under his nose. In the end, Minato just waved a hand and dropped himself on the couch again, realizing he would have to interrogate Jiraiya later to get some real answers out of him. Then he glanced up to the clock to note the very late hour. Where the hell is my brother? Jiraiya snorted. I assume it's causing trouble, as always. I overheard him inviting the IWA genin from yesterday for ramen if he was able to get into the next round. They still must be at Ichiraku, but Minato trailed off. Yeah, Ichiraku closes at 10. It's already almost midnight. He won't stay open this late even for your ramen-addicted brother. He must be sitting on your stupid stone head again, musing or philosophizing or whatever he's always doing up there. Minato nodded and tilted his head side to side until he heard the satisfying popping sound as one of his joints slipped back to its proper place. Why don't you just go and pick him up with your Hiraishin? The seal is still on his back, isn't it? Minato thought about it for a moment and nodded once more. Right. Will you stay here until we get back? I don't want to leave Kushina alone in her state right now. Jiraiya snorted. Oh, don't be afraid. She's got companions. Minato tilted his head again in confusion and let out a sigh, seeing that he won't be able to squeeze out any straight answer from his teacher tonight. Instead, he closed his eyes and reached out for his brother's seal and chakra signature. Jiraiya watched him curiously as, instead of disappearing immediately, a frown appeared on his features in his concentration. What? You can't even find a teenage boy's chakra? Jiraiya was about to send another jab, when Minato shook his head and answered, his eyes scrunching as he concentrated even more. But his brow moved into one coherent line. It doesn't feel normal. I can barely sense my marker, and it is somewhere under the Hokage monument. What? Jiraiya snapped and stood up immediately. What do you mean by that? Exactly what I just said. I'm barely able to locate his seal. Like he's under a barrier, buried deep inside the mountain. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes. A Doton Jutsu? Minato shook his head. No. I saw him trying to use Doton. He really tried. And he was frustrated beyond words when he couldn't pull it out. His chakra is flowing through my seal like it feels like he's sleeping or he's unconscious. The IWA team? Minato's frown deepened as he reached for his other markers. No. 3 of my best A and BU are watching over them after that incident. All of my markers on the IWA members are in their accommodation, sleeping peacefully. Couldn't you just simply teleport to where he is? Jiraiya's voice was filled with concern now. I've been trying to do so from the beginning, but the seal is weak beyond words. Minato stopped for a second. I got it. With this last yell, the toad found himself alone in the living room. Only Kushina's soft snoring leaked inside the empty room. Jiraiya glanced toward the closed door and sighed, softly murmuring into the air around him. I really hope, Kushina, that the baby in your womb won't cause this much trouble, or Minato is going to be a white-haired man the time he hits 30. Minato stumbled into hard rock when he reappeared in the empty passage, meters from his proposed destination thanks to the faint marker. His head connected with the raw surface with a loud bang in the empty and silent passage. The blonde had been desperately trying to force the dancing stars out from his sight, and he was about to shake his head, but he froze in mid-movement as a harsh smell reached his nose. The stink of death, of burnt bodies all around him, and the smell of his brother's blood. He slowly glanced down where he could sense Toriku, and he gasped as he spotted his brother's form lying motionlessly on the floor, his clothes bloody and torn. He rushed toward his brother and slowly turned him over, and he had to restrain another gasp when the stench of someone else's blood flickered through his nose. He immediately made a quick checkup on his relative and let out a relieved sigh. Nothing serious, some wounds and a slash on his side, but it had already half healed. He had passed out because of shock based on the pattern of his chakra flow. Something new hit his nose from his brother's clothes, the smell of reptiles. The sore smell of snakes Orochimaru. Azure blue eyes immediately started to map his surroundings, finding several weak chakra signatures not far away from him, but the Sannin was nowhere to be seen or sensed. The thick and disgusting stink of burnt flesh invaded his nose from the other side. He ran to the entrance where the thick stench was coming from, his eyes widened by the enormous empty cave inside the Hokage monument. His eyes ran through the countless number of barrier seals all around the hard surface, noting the signs of an enormous battle and also the charred remains of a body at the other side of it, near an immense crater. The body which, beside the burned flesh, still reeked of snakes. It was Orochimaru. Confusion ran across him, but instead of burying himself in his troubled thoughts, experience kicked itself in line. He made his way back to his brother, but he didn't stop. He took aim at the end of the passage when he heard a groan from there. This time, he couldn't suppress his shocked gasp as the air rushed into his lungs with insane speed by the sight. Dozens of cells were lying on each side of the cave, a quarter of it holding faint, very weak and slowly fading chakra signatures. Most of the people were on the verge of death, and only a small push would be enough for them to pass the line. Everything smelled like Orochimaru. It was his place. It was his doing. Minato hurried toward the nearest cell, and after a quick survey of its interior, he immediately made an opening between the bars, enough for him to slip inside, toward the small, slumped body laying motionlessly in a dark corner. A child, based on his size not more than 10. The captive didn't react to his presence in even the slightest way, only the weak, rhythmical movement of his chest hinted that the child was indeed alive. Minato made his decision in the next blink. He didn't know what the hell was going on here, but there was no way he would wait for even one more second to get help. He needed Toriku's marker here, and he was stable, just unconscious. He blinked, and when he opened his eyes in the next second, he reappeared next to his teacher, who opened his mouth to ask what the hell was going on. But Jiraiya didn't have time to speak. Minato's commanding voice filled the room immediately. Umbu. 4 masked and cloaked men appeared beside him in the next blink. Cat, you stay here. Watch over Kushina. Before the soldier could even nod, Minato grabbed Jiraiya and the other 3 stunned shinobi and disappeared from the room. Jiraiya opened his eyes and turned his head when 2 of the elites slumped to the floor by the aftereffects of the Hurricane. Minato's commanding voice kicked the wobbly standing Anbu out from his shock, immediately straightening himself. There are cells with captives all across this passage. I'll go grab any available medics and be back in a minute. Go check on them and get rid of the bars. The 2 A and B will be okay in a minute. Toriku is also here, stable, but there is also a corpse there. Jiraiya moved his head where Minato pointed. His eyes widened when he finally recognized his friend's scent under the heavy smell of burned flesh. The unmistakable smell of a serpent. The 2 A and B gathered themselves surprisingly fast and disappeared with the 3rd at the other side of the passage to obey their leader's order. Jiraiya, it's him. It's Orochimaru's place. Stay professional, please. I need you here, calm and collected. The Sannin only distantly felt as he nodded, his eyes still locked on the small entrance where Minato pointed, not really noticing as his student disappeared. A low moan disturbed his frozen state. The faint sound of ruffling clothes and sudden coughing and spitting interrupted his troubled thoughts. He glanced down to the slowly waking Toriku, who suddenly stiffened, his eyes flung open and widened as memories overwhelmed him again. Blue eyes stared into the nothingness unfocused for long seconds until Jiraiya slowly walked closer and leaned over him. Naruto immediately jumped onto his feet when Jiraiya touched his shoulder, not concerned with the already healing slash on his side. He backed off until his back hit a hard surface, only to a second later slide down slowly, his eyes staring unblinkingly to his own hands. His breathing was harsh by the sudden surge of adrenaline, and an unconscious gag escaped his sore mouth. Jiraiya reached for him once more to shake him out from his state of shock and get some answers he was eager to know, grabbing his shoulders and turning him face to face. But the azure blue eyes didn't connect with his own, they were staring somewhere behind him. Jiraiya shook the blonde once again, and this time the light of consciousness reappeared in the blue eyes. What happened? The named blonde glanced down to his own hands once again, and for a second Jiraiya thought he wouldn't be able to shake him out of his state once more. But his faint whisper washed out his concern about his sanity. Orochimaru, he brought me here after the premises. He blackmailed me to come with him. He wanted to experiment on me because I heal fast. Then he made up his mind and got me with his snakes. Naruto's hand traveled toward his neck. Despite his healing ability, 2 small and red bite marks were still visible on his neck, together with several more on his arms peeking out under his torn clothes. Then we fought. His whisper slowly died down, and Jiraiya squeezed his shoulder to gain his attention. It was successful. Azure blue eyes snapped up, to stare into Jiraiya's own. And then what? What happened? Naruto's eyes slipped to the side in shame. And then I killed him. His eyes widened when he realized once again as it slipped out from his mouth. His stomach turned upside down again as the memories started to push themselves into his thoughts again, and another gag escaped behind his gritted teeth. But this time, he fortunately suppressed the urge. Stay focused. Azure eyes snapped up in alert by the commanding voice, shaking him up again. His breathing steadied and his heartbeat decreased to a normal level. Then his eyes widened when he finally realized something very important. There are people down here. He had experimented on them. They need help. Naruto pushed Jiraiya out of his way and jumped to his feet to stumble 2 or 3 steps before he leaned against the wall to get some support, the world dangerously tilted as blood rushed inside his head by the sudden movement. A new thought popped up in his head, immediately sweeping his dizziness to the side. This gave him a new power to lock away his previous shock and his weariness. With a huge chakra wave, he mapped out his surroundings and found what he was looking for. Immediately, he rushed to the deeper part of the caves where the cells were, rushing past 2 stunned ANBU with Jiraiya in his heels, heading toward the last cell, ripping the bars out from their place and dropping himself next to a small body. Naruto gently brushed out the spiky brown hair that stuck to the child's face, and let out a relieved sigh when he noted the steady heartbeat and breathing of his once team leader. Another sigh of relief escaped behind his lips as the child's eyes slowly opened to stare up at him with a blank expression. Then the ink-black eyes suddenly cleared when he noticed the stranger with a bright smile above him. You managed to escape. Is it over? He won't come back? Yamato whispered in disbelief. Naruto nodded before he whispered back. It's over. He won't come back. The child's eyes slowly became foggy again, but this time because they restrained tears. However, it was a lost cause. Just when his lips turned up into a bright and relieved smile, tears started to flow over his sunken cheeks. It was that moment medics infested the place, gently pushing Naruto out of their way, and it was then when he felt Minato's gentle hands squeezing his shoulder reassuringly. He glanced up to his father, who sent him a small, comforting smile, giving a helping hand to him, so he could retreat to the background, where a medic already waited for him to treat his own wounds. But he refused it. They would heal in hours anyway, and the others needed every available help more than him. He just stood there with his father's hand still on his shoulder, silently watching as the medics were working on Yamato and the others. But when an ANBU stepped next to them, he could unwillingly overhear his report, making his body stiffen. Someone already informed the council, Hokage-sama. They want an immediate meeting, and someone from the council is charging Namake's Toriku with treason and murdering Orochimaru of the Sanins anonymously. The ANBU made a hesitant side glance behind his mask before he continued with an even lower tone if possible. Hokage-sama, the punishment for treason is the ANBU who had been the blonde boy's shadow for long months has suddenly become silent, losing his will to finish the sentence. But it wasn't the ANBU nor the Hokage who spoke out loud what had been left hanging in the air, two words that none of them dared to voice out loud. It was Naruto who murmured into the thick air. Death sentence. The blonde time traveler slowly moved his strangely emotionless and hard azure eyes up to his father, forcing his tense muscles to obey. But when a gentle hand squeezed his shoulder once again, his muscles immediately started to relax. Another arm wrapped around his other shoulder, reassuringly holding him tighter to his side like a soft pillow to lull away his fear, and Minato softly murmured into his ears, loosening the last remains of his tension. "Everything will be all right. I promise." And Naruto believed every word instantly. Chapter 21. Two Foxes, a Crow and a Hawk. It had been 6 hours by the time the last of the medics left the caves together with the last remaining survivor of Orochimaru's hidden activity, and another 6 more since the meeting had started. The council was silent, despite everyone's shock, storms of indignation, disbelief, denial, and even utter confusion. All of the members were dragged out from their beds, requesting their immediate presence. None of the clan leaders knew any details about what had exactly happened. Just the fact that someone had killed the legendary. Most likely the one who had anonymously charged the blonde time traveler was desperate enough to pull out this tantrum, without full knowledge of the situation. Even the always loud Jiraiya sat quietly in one of the room's corners, his gaze locked in front of him, unfocused. The rare occasions he regained his composure were when he glanced toward the blonde teen from time to time, carefully avoiding Naruto's eyes. Jiraiya locked his feelings behind a wall, and he struggled between his own emotions, trying to deal with the loss and betrayal of his friend, and shifting between feelings of anger against his murderer and fear for Torika's life. But Naruto wouldn't be fooled by his teacher's calm shell. He knew perfectly well Orochimaru was one of Jiraiya's best friends. He was one of his precious people, and he killed him. It was him who killed him. Guilt rose inside his chest from time to time as he also snuck peeks at his godfather when he wouldn't notice. Soon, the court wasn't about him, his treason, or his murder. It was about Orochimaru, and what he had done. At the beginning of the sudden trial, most members sent warning glances toward him. Even Inoichi eyed him more carefully than ever. Only the Nara clan head and Uchiha Fugaku watched him with calm, but still calculating eyes. Sharingan flared into life from time to time. Even Kurama was dead silent, observing the situation without a word. Naruto finished his report an hour ago, carefully leaving out some of the sensitive things. Like how Orochimaru had blackmailed him, and exactly how he was able to win a battle against one of the Sanins. It was surprisingly easy even for him. He didn't have to face Jiraiya or Minato. It was Danzo who asked the questions, trying to twist everyone against him. Lying into the face of that bastard was miles easier than lying to his parents and godfather. The false words slipped from his lips so easily that even he was afraid of himself for a blink before he pushed the thought away. He was adamant that it was the old war hawk who informed the council. It was a desperate and rash decision from Danzo. Even if he didn't know much about the man, he was perfectly sure that behind his calm and emotionless shell, he was screaming inside his head because of his own stupid and desperate step. But Naruto felt that he was missing something very important. Naruto just half listened as the shinobi was listing the already processed evidence against the once cheered Sannin. The uncountable number of corpses they had found in another place in the middle of Konoha had been discovered thanks to the only survivor's statement. Somehow the small boy Tenzo was able to provide some important details pointing out the lab's whereabouts when Orochimaru moved him to his new accommodation. It was buried deep underground, in the middle of the ancient sewers of the oldest part of the town, hidden by several layers of seals tidily copied from the cave Naruto and Orochimaru had been fighting in. All over the place, bodies were strung up along the walls on wooden platforms, or lying around in the room ready for later use and investigation. Naruto was glad Orochimaru dragged him to this cave and not to that place. He would definitely have gone berserk in the tunnels if he had to witness that sight. It was hard enough to see people behind bars, but seeing the corpses of innocent children, Naruto shook his head and glanced toward the small podium in the middle of the council chamber. The shinobi continued listing evidence. They counted almost 100 grown men and women, and 55 corpses of children altogether in the 2 hidden laboratories. They had found masses upon masses of notes, books and scrolls filled with information and complete descriptions of his experiments. When the man finally finished his report, a medic stepped to the center of the council room to read out her own. Her voice faltered from time to time as she couldn't surpass some of her surfacing emotions. From the dozen survivors they had found in the chambers, only one child's condition was stable. Furthermore, he was conscious and already questioned. The interrogator also verified what the evidence was so clearly screaming. It was Orochimaru's secret laboratory. The other survivors weren't as lucky. They had already lost 4 of the children in the last 6 hours, and nothing gave the impression the adults would make it through the night. Silence fell when the medic finished her report and slowly moved to the background. It was now the lead interrogator's turn to step on the small podium. The child and the medic reports verified Namikaze Toriku's claims that Orochimaru restrained him with his snake summons, and he was dragged until they reached the main chamber. From that point, there is no witness who can verify Toriko-san's words that he managed to free himself and kill Orochimaru of the Sannin by himself with a lucky fire jutsu. Paper ruffled as Makoto checked his notes. Toriko-san claimed that he had hit Orochimaru with a combination of fire and wind jutsu while Orochimaru was on the ground after Toriko-san had made a final kick to his face. Based on the postmortem, the cause of death was a broken neck, while the fire jutsu was cast after his death, which supports Toriko-san's statement. Nobody moved, nobody said a word or even coughed. Finally Minato broke the stupor as he slowly sat up to make the decision. Naruto flinched when his father called for him to stand in the middle. His slow footsteps were followed by an Anbu. We've heard enough. I hereby close the council meeting. Namikaze Minato, as the Yondaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, finds Orochimaru of the Sannin guilty against the charge of treason and murdering, torturing and experimenting on 169 men, women and children. State your disagreement if there is any. Minato glanced around the still silent room. Nobody made any intention to retort. Furthermore, I hereby clear Namikaze Toriku of the charge of treason and murder. Again, nothing could be heard. The clan leaders stayed in silence. Only some of them glanced toward the silent and obviously exhausted team with a calculating eye. All of them knew that Minato's relative was strong, even if he currently held only the rank of. But to be on an equal level of one of the Sannin both unnerved and satisfied them. I hereby declare all information about this case to be an S-class secret. No one is allowed to reveal any information without the Hokage's express permission. Minato slowly ran his eyes over each and every member in the chamber, one by one, before he narrowed his azure orbs. Something changed in the atmosphere as if something had clicked inside him, making every attendant hunch over in fear, like a small child. In the next moment his stern voice echoed inside the chamber. I don't know who was so foolish in your lines to charge my brother without any real clue and clear knowledge of the whole situation, but I can promise one thing. If I ever find evidence against who was the one who informed and gathered the council behind my back, he will be the one standing on that podium instead of my brother, and he will be charged with treason by me. Minato shot one more glare toward each of the still and deadly silent members. His cerulean pools left Danzo's stoic face just a fraction later than the others. After the declaration the room slowly emptied. Some of the members stopped for a quick nod toward the young Chunin, while Inoichi made a small bow. Naruto was still carefully avoiding Jiraiya's dark eyes as he and the Sandaime passed beside him, but he still stared at the closed door silently after the two left the room. Soon, only the two Namikaze stayed in the empty room with the overwhelming silence. However, they also departed without even a single word. A harsh, snapping sound echoed inside the dim chamber as a shadowed figure channeled some of his growing frustration onto his desk, clutching the edge too hard for the wood to endure the strain. Shimura Danzo strained all of his nerves so as not to break his emotionless mask. Who could have guessed that the Namikaze brat would stop his Anbu from reaching the last surviving brat? And who would have thought that that brat had enough power to even spit out details like that? His undercover Anbu had informed him that Orochimaru's hideout was discovered as soon as the Hokage disappeared. He thought that with eliminating all witnesses, the charge would be enough against that damn brat. He had acted too fast, too recklessly when the opportunity that he could get rid of the Namikaze brat arose. In the next blink, he forced his muscles to relax. His old and raspy voice filled the chamber as he hissed into the darkness, low enough that only he could hear it. That Toriku child. He is too powerful. Nobody sees what I can see, that he is a threat to Konoha. His eyes stared into the darkness suddenly clear and focused. His face was stoic once again. Rat. An Anbu appeared beside him instantly in a crouch, head bowed carefully. Let's move to another tactic. If we can't get rid of him by force, we will make him leave Konoha willingly. The ANBU quickly looked up to face his leader, waiting for the orders. His face was carefully schooled and showed no emotion. The boy has got a good reputation among the villagers. They like him. Let's destroy that image. Start spreading the word about what happened to Orochimaru in the village. Dress as a civilian, go to the market, to the bars. Let's open the citizens' eyes to what kind of monster Namikaze Toriku is. That he cold-heartedly killed one of Konoha's heroes. Let's raise fear in the sidelines and let the villagers do the rest. The morning was awkward. Minato acted like nothing had happened before, while Kushina was weary and silent. Her hand traveled toward her belly from time to time, stealing small glances toward the blonde leader. But her acts went unnoticed by the two blondes. A new presence kicked Naruto out from his own small world, a presence which sent all of his previous strength out of his body along with the blood in his face. Jiraiya stepped into the room, still carefully avoiding Naruto's eyes, but still noting his reaction, his pale face and tensed muscles. In the next instant the time traveler and his godfather were alone in the dining room as his parents retreated to give them space. Naruto stubbornly stared at his empty plate in front of him, while Jiraiya occupied the counter, leaning against it, his arms folded in front of his chest. Both of them were waiting for the other to finally start the unavoidable conversation, and finally it was Naruto who blurted out first. I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. You did the right thing. Finally Naruto raised his head, to meet with Jiraiya's eyes. The Toad Summoner looked obviously weary, dark circles sat under his orbs, while his wrinkles somehow seemed deeper from the lack of sleep and the last night's stress. You should be. The blonde shinobi said the first thing that came to his mind. They eyed him for some time until a humorless smile tilted the corners of his mouth. My best friend died a long time ago. He died the moment he went against everything I hold dear. You've killed a soulless shell. A shadow. Naruto opened his mouth to respond, but somehow nothing came out of it, so he instead shut it when the aging Toad Summoner let out a long sigh. You know, I was aware that something was wrong with him lately. His obsession with immortality, and to learn every jutsu in the world became worse and worse with every passing day. And what is more disturbing is that myself and my sensei turned our heads from some of the things which pointed toward what he was doing in the background. We were blinded by our bonds. I did realize that Orochimaru became antisocial, that he disappeared between missions, and after Minato became the Yondaime Hokage instead of him, that it became worse. Jiraiya unfolded his arms and slowly moved to sit down at the table across from his temporary student. It is also my fault what has happened to you and the others. I should have seen the signs. Azure blue eyes glanced up suddenly, as guilt started to emanate from the Sanin's pores. No. It was never your fault. He was mad. If I wasn't seeing it with my own eyes, my opinion would be different. If I didn't see the cells, the people and the children down there, I think I would have been angry at you. I would even try to defend him. I would have tried to reason with him, tried to save him. But after I saw what he had done, I'm not angry at you. You did the right thing. I'm still sorry. I didn't want to kill him. I just... Don't be a fool. Another conversation popped up in his mind, in another time and another version of his godfather. A small smile appeared on his face while he murmured his answer softly. I'm not a fool. I'm a moron. Jiraiya raised a confused eyebrow, but let it be. But he silently agreed. He was indeed a total moron. Rin and Kakashi are waiting for you at the usual place. We'll meet there. And I remind you, Minato ordered a total information lockdown. What happened down there is now an S-ranked secret. The last thing this village needs in the middle of a Chunin exam is the bashing of other countries. Naruto nodded and silently left the room. He passed by his father in the living room, who watched as he silently dragged himself out from the house. Only when his chakra signature started to fade away to the distance did Minato look up to meet Jiraiya's eyes. You are cruel. After what had happened, you really sent him to the training ground? Jiraiya sank down on the couch before he answered. You also know that exhaustion is the best medicine for troubled thoughts. Jiraiya opened his mouth to tell more, when a new presence appeared on the doorstep. He let out a long sigh as his once teacher slowly approached the living room, flaring his chakra for a second to be recognizable before he stepped through the doorway. Experienced and old eyes traveled over the two sitting men, his hands unconsciously looking for the pipe from his pouch, but it was nowhere to be found. Sarutobi let out a weary sigh and also sank down into one of the empty chairs to ease away his own weariness. The three men stayed in silence. Only one or two meaningful and knowing glances were shared between them until the Sandaime broke it. "How is Toraku-kun?" Physically, he was almost perfectly healed when the council meeting ended. Mentally, the blonde leader shook his head. "He is too kind-hearted and naive for this profession. I saw greenhorn Chunins during the war after their first kill. Some were unaffected, while others were almost as shook up as him. Even if killing is part of being a shinobi, school and tales could never prepare you well enough for the real experience. It becomes easier and easier with time, but you'll never get used to it. You'll always remember each life you've ended. Their faces will be burned deep inside your mind forever." Minato murmured more to himself than to the others in the room, his eyes locked on his hands. "And how is Kushina?" asked Sarutobi, diverting the subject. Minato made a quick and altogether thankful glance toward the third. Like nothing had ever happened. "She is a little bit weary, but beside that she is okay. The seal is also as powerful as ever. I still don't know what happened to it." A fatherly smile spread across Sarutobi's face despite what had happened the previous night. A small bright ray of sunshine warmed him up from head to toe as he eyed the clueless village leader. "Did Kushina speak to you?" Sandaime noted the blank look on Minato's face and shook his head. "I take that as a no." Once Hokage then looked at his student, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the deepened wrinkles in the corner of his eyes and mouth. One night. Only one night was enough to do the work of a decade on Jiraiya's face. And he didn't have to look in the mirror, he knew he would also find the same on his own face. "And how are you, my friend?" Jiraiya closed his eyes and folded his arms in a defensive manner before he answered. "I could have asked the same question from you, old man. He was also your student. Not just my bastard teammate." The Sandaime let out a long and weary sigh. "If I hadn't been that blind, maybe we could have found out what he was doing earlier. And if I even think about the fact that I almost made him Hokage instead of Minato, but I'm still hoping that deep down in his heart there was still some kindness and light beside the darkness and the madness." The old leader shook his head once more, wrinkles deepening with emotion and the new frown on his features. "If it wasn't for Toraku-kun, who knows how long it would have been until we found out, maybe many, long years. I don't know, if it would have been me who found that situation, would I be able to do the right thing?" The Sandaime let out a long sigh and opened his sore mouth. "I talked with the boy after the council meeting. With the one who had survived Orochimaru's experiments." He stumbled slightly over the name. "He was kidnapped from an orphan house in AIM. My late teammate gathered his subjects from them or temporary accommodations in AIM. Sometimes picking up lonely, wandering shinobi." Minato grimaced. "It makes sense. AIM is isolated. No word would reach the elemental countries about the disappearance of orphans and people from there. If he had picked up the people from Konoha or the other big nations, we would investigate with full force." Jiraiya nodded and continued, while Sarutobi's troubled frown only deepened. "We found dozens of Sharingan eyes. He was obsessed by its power that allowed the user to copy any jutsu. We found ancient scrolls about the Mangekyo Sharingan. We found several corpses with injuries which indicated a failed eye transplant, probably with a Sharingan, and notes about a new experiment, which needs a powerful host. It seems that all of his previous transplants failed because the host's bodies weren't ready for them. Their chakra system was full-grown. He needed a young shinobi with still developing chakra coils and high reserves for his experiment. It seems that's why Kakashi's surgery was successful. Because he is young and his chakra system could adapt to the Sharingan, and also have the necessary reserves to activate them. Or someone like Toraku. With his healing abilities and chakra level, he was a perfect subject." Jiraiya glanced toward Minato. "I think I know how he appeared from thin air inside the village walls." Minato narrowed his eyes and gestured to his teacher to continue. "I think that my teammate brought him here to experiment on him with one of those eyes. Yamato also told me that he liked to wear a henge with a Sharingan. He became obviously insane. That's why Toraku first thought he was in a genjutsu. That's why he thought he had been fighting with an Uchiha. He somehow managed to escape and Jiraiya suddenly became silent, but instead of him, Minato had continued with a guilty expression. I let Orochimaru into his room to examine him while Toraku was unconscious after our first meeting in the hospital passage. When he blacked out, I left Orochimaru alone with him while I was rearranging the new ANBU guards. It was him who messed up his memories to save himself. And the more and more frequent encounters with him triggered some of his memories. His rage and hatred. Every time he looked at Orochimaru, I waited for Toriku to snap and tear him into small pieces. Furthermore, Orochimaru was in carefully restrained ecstasy to examine Kakashi when he heard about his Sharingan the day we arrived. And in that week, Orochimaru was wounded while fighting with someone. Minato frowned before he continued. But then Toriku never knew Nagato. Our previous theory was wrong. And how on earth was Orochimaru able to bring him here if he was able to kill him? Jiraiya shook his head and rubbed his eyes. I'm still sure he knows Nagato. There is no other way he would know about my book. That theory is still the most plausible for his background. He must be from AIM. And now, we've got a new question. How he appeared here inside Konoha. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes before he continued. It was Orochimaru who brought him to his lab. Maybe he stumbled across him on one of his travels and tricked him into coming to Konoha with him. His resemblance to you is obvious. Maybe he tricked him with the promise of a family, that he has a relative here. I mean you. If he had fabricated that story, I'm sure Toriku would follow him willingly here. He can be very naive sometimes. It would also explain his reaction to you in that passage. Maybe even for Sarutobi. It's not unheard of if someone was restrained by a powerful genjutsu. I know several genjutsu which play with a captive's head, showing him his rescue mission. But we won't know the full story until Toriku tells us. Minato shook his head. I don't want to push him. His past was obviously a hard one. I don't want to break him. If he wants to tell us more about himself, he will. Maybe it is better for all of us. I mean if his memories won't recover perfectly. His two companions didn't answer, they just stood there silently, all of them buried in his own thoughts, trying to process the happenings of the previous night. Finally Sarutobi broke it by shaking his head and letting out a long, weary sigh. You're making up your own conclusions and wild theories, and desperately trying to bring truth into them. There is no real evidence to support what you just came up with. But we should get some rest. Yesterday was a busy night. For all of us. Let's just leave your wild theories for today and not bother ourselves with these kinds of thoughts. We still have a lot of things to do. Enko should have already arrived at the Hokage Tower, waiting for me and Minato. Both men turned toward the retired village leader, but they didn't retort. Instead, they obeyed his words as small children would do. Minato closed his eyes in the middle of his office in the Hokage Tower. The shocked Enko was long gone, as well as Jiraiya and Sarutobi, but Minato's racing mind and face never had an opportunity to relax. The head of Konoha's medic requested an immediate audience as soon as he was left alone. And from the first minute of the report, a deep frown had been carved upon his fine features. The Hokage pinched the bridge of his nose and opened his mouth. Are you sure about this? The medic nodded. Yes, Hokage-sama. The cause of death was poisoning for everybody who we had rescued alive from the laboratory. All the survivors were poisoned beside the small kid with a slowly acting toxin. We could have easily brushed the effects to the side, but when the child didn't show any symptoms like the others, we started to get suspicious. So we performed several tests and one was positive. When? Minato asked in a low voice and finally opened his eyes to pierce directly through the medic, who unconsciously flinched a step back when the always sunny eyes suddenly became cold as glaciers. They looked dangerous now, like a real predator. And most likely during the rescue mission. He was in the last cell. He was lucky because of that. Someone successfully poisoned everybody in Orochimaru's laboratory, but he or she didn't have enough time to reach him before help arrived. Minato narrowed his eyes, his muscles tensed. With one flick of his hand he dismissed the medic, who gratefully retreated from the furious form of his leader maybe a little bit faster than was necessary. He really felt sorry for the traitor if his leader ever found them. Yondaime buried himself inside his thoughts, pacing back and forth inside the now empty office. 3 pairs of eyes followed him from the shadows. The ANBU guards were on high alert, seeing their leader's rising frustration. Minato suddenly stopped. His commanding voice filled the tower once again. Tiger, Owl! The named 2 ANBU almost flinched despite their experience, but they obediently stepped in front of the Hokage, waiting for commands. Get 2 ANBU squads and grab the 3 ANBU who were with me during the rescue mission. Bring them to the interrogation department, and question them about the incident. The 2 soldiers disappeared in the next blink. Minato let out a weary sigh and slowly moved toward the window and folded his arms behind his back to look over the still clueless village. However, his silence was disturbed just half an hour later as one of the previous ANBU reappeared inside his office. Hokage-sama. Report. Wolf and Sparrow were successfully captured. They didn't even fight back. But Minato narrowed his eyes and finally turned around to face the nervous soldier, who finally continued. Bor is dead. He committed suicide during the ambush. There had been a cyanide capsule hidden inside one of his teeth. Minato dismissed the ANBU and ran a hand through his blonde locks in the attempt to channel down some of his growing frustration. A lonely ANBU watched as his leader's anger had been slowly rising and rising until it exploded into an almost animalistic snarl. However, he wasn't aware of Minato's first intent to punch the wall with a Rasengan. The Hokage shook himself in the next second and straightened. His chakra flared for a second with fury before it faded away. Crow! The until now lurking ANBU appeared in the middle of the room, warily eyeing his leader after the small outburst. I have a new personal mission for you. The ANBU curiously tilted his head to the side, waiting for his Hokage to continue. Your father, he was Shimura Danzo's teammate, wasn't he? The ANBU stilled for a second, and Minato could have sworn that he saw the obsidian eyes narrowing behind the white porcelain before he answered. Yes, Hokage-sama. Minato made a brief nod and he stepped closer to the soldier. Not in a threatening manner, but... The seasoned shinobi soon felt like an animal in a corner. Without his experience, he was sure he would gulp. Tell me, Crow. Where does your loyalty lie? The ANBU tilted his head in a puzzled manner, and the yondaime was sure that a confused expression spread across his face behind the smooth surface of his mask. Are you a loyal shinobi of Konoha? Yes, Hokage-sama. Are you loyal to the Hokage? Yes, Hokage-sama. Are you loyal to anyone else besides the Hokage in Konoha? Minato didn't get an answer, however. Only a choke sound escaped behind the ANBU's lips. A half-smile appeared on the blonde's face. I know a lot about you. I also have my contacts. You are having doubts about him and his methods, aren't you? You could have been his perfect soldier, but you couldn't kill your emotions, could you? The ANBU tensed for a second, before his shoulders slumped in defeat. He slowly raised his arm to get rid of the cold porcelain mask, and the hood also slipped down to his shoulders, revealing his short and untidy dark locks. Obsidian dark eyes peered into Minato's electric blue ones, filled with regret, shame, and sorrow. Only that one look convenienced Minato that he was doing the right thing. No shinobi should have that kind of look. Not someone his age. He made one step closer to the boy in his early teens and softly placed one hand on his shoulder. I had only once spoken with Uchiha Kagami. But I know that he was greatly dedicated to protecting this village. He had accomplished much for the sake of Konoha, and I am adamant that his will has been passed on to his son. Minato watched the young boy's painful wince and reassuringly squeezed his shoulder a little. So I ask you just one question. How far will you go for the sake of the village? The ANBU didn't answer for a long minute, trying to figure out his leader's intentions. But when he did so, his confident voice filled the room. I will gladly sacrifice myself in the name of peace, Hokage-sama. A soft, almost fatherly smile appeared on Minato's face. However, I appreciate your self-sacrifice. That won't be necessary. You're going to infiltrate the infiltrators. Minato's soft smile started to widen, but in the next blink his eyes hardened as steel and the ANBU furrowed his brow in confusion. Are you ready to become a double agent en route, Uchiha Shursui? But this time for Konoha? You are a liar. You promised me a free treat of ramen. The young IWA genin whined behind a pout to Naruto and folded his arms in a sulking manner, who just stared back at him with a strangely restrained and emotionless face until he let out a long sigh and answered. I'm sorry. I forgot about that. He had stumbled across the young boy on the almost empty streets of the village, or most likely Shiko had been looking for him the whole day to Naruto's displeasure. The kid reminded him more and more of Konohamaru. He only needed a long blue scarf, and if he would wear his 8 on his forehead to hold back his hair, instead of around his neck, they would pass as siblings. The loud Chunin had the same eyes, and he looked back at him just now in the same mocking way as Konohamaru did when he was irritated with him. A sour and painful smile crawled onto his face, watching the young Iwa genin, but it was hard seeing the shadow or the ghost of his once rival. Konohamaru had stayed in Konoha with his genin team to watch over the almost empty village and the civilians. Their bodies had never been recovered, most likely disappeared together with the walls around Konoha. Something must have shown on his face, as the child's rambling suddenly stopped, and chocolate brown eyes started to observe him somewhat warily. The sour smile was replaced with a false grin when Naruto ruffled the brown locks of his newest friend. "Come on, I'll treat you to free ramen after I'm finished with Jiraiya." His only answer was an enthusiastic nod. The Sannin had been late, and to Naruto's annoyance none of his friends were in a talkative mood, leaving him to sink into his own thoughts, and in a second he found himself in his mindscape face to face with Kurama watching him with calculating red eyes. "This isn't the best time, you know. We have to talk. Jiraiya could be here any moment." Naruto grumbled, but the fox's expression stayed stoic, his eyes observing. "This can't wait." Naruto snorted and folded his arms across his chest. "If you want to talk about what you've done, it's not necessary. I understand its need. And I also won't confess to Minato until we have found Madara. We've discussed this subject for months and It's about the seal." Kurama interrupted him, silencing Naruto's rambling immediately, forcing him to glance up with a frown. "About my seal?" "Yes. I've been thinking about what had happened in the cave. Even under that many chakra suppression seals, the emotion of my other self still influenced us when we used our full power. I think closing our original seal would prevent that next time." Naruto snorted once more and an angry grimace spread across his face. "I won't reclose the seal. I won't lock you up, even if it is for our own good. No." Kurama's face mirrored no emotion, he kept it as stoic as it always was as he answered while he observed his companion. "We will need our full power against Madara, and we will need a clear head. Both of us. We can't make any mistakes. You do realize that?" "I do," Naruto hissed. "But I won't change my mind. I won't let you be stuck behind bars once more. There has to be another way. I'll go and dig up the library to find a mind barrier or something which is powerful enough to restrain your counterpart's emotions." Kurama let out a sigh but nodded. "While I appreciate what you just said, I still think the easiest way is reclosing the seal." Naruto frowned as his brain worked. Defiant eyes stared in front of himself, while his hands clenched into fists at his side. The blonde suddenly opened his brilliant blue eyes, but in the next moment he felt a familiar thug from the outside world. He made one last glance toward his companion while a giant grin appeared on his face. "I know what we are going to do about that." Kurama narrowed his crimson pools, suspiciously eyeing his host for a long second. In the end he simply shook his head and motioned toward the back of the mindscape. "We will talk about this later. You should go now or he will think that you are sleeping." Naruto sent a last beaming smile. When he opened his eyes in the next blink in the real world, he found himself face to face with a crouching Jiraiya staring at him just centimeters from his face. "How the hell can you sleep this deep? Maybe we should delay this training. Go home and get some rest." Naruto snorted, shook his head and straightened himself, brushing off some of the dirt from his pants. "No way. I need this training. And I could say the same. You look like shit." Jiraiya snorted and stepped to the side to give some space to the young boy. "True. A small spar will raise both of our moods, I think." A small smile spread across Naruto's face almost instantly, and he gratefully accepted the help of his godfather. In the end, he was right. His gathered frustration evaporated freely from his mind and his muscles with each punch he had given to the toad sage. A small weight of his burden disappeared with each hit he received, and at the end of the day, he slumped to the ground by exhaustion with a satisfied smile on his face. His previous troubled thoughts were nowhere to be found. "So? What's your plan?" Naruto rearranged his relaxed face muscles into a wide grin. "The plan is that I'm going to do what I'm the best at." Kurama raised a confused eyebrow, or at least the place his eyebrows should be. However, before he could word out his confusion, Naruto opened his mouth. "I'm good at affecting people, correct?" Kurama made a small hesitant nod. "Then I'm going to speak with your other self sealed inside Kushina and ask you or him, or whatever, to cooperate to save the world from doom." Nothing could be heard for a long silent minute. Naruto just grinned at his companion, while the giant fox just stared back at him with a raised eyebrow. However, the silence was soon interrupted by Kurama's loud echoing laughter. You know, brat, that is the stupidest idea I've ever heard from you. Naruto grimaced and his expression soon turned into a pout, folding his arms in front of his chest in a sulking manner, watching as Kurama slowly gathered himself from his fits of laughter. However, your stupid ideas have a tendency to actually work, Kurama chuckled, making Naruto brighten up almost instantly, forgetting his previous sulking. So, can we do it? Can we talk to you like with the other Biji during the war? The fox made a wondering face, then nodded. It is possible. However, Kushina's seal is different. It is a real Uzumaki seal. We have to do it while she is sleeping, or there's a chance that we could trigger a defense mechanism in the seal. Like your own seal, Kushina's also allows a connection between the host and my old self. She might feel our Kurama stopped there for a moment, looking for a fitting word. Presence. His only answer was a wide, confident grin and a determined glint in azure eyes. Uzumaki Naruto silently sat on his bed in a meditating pose. His ears twitched when the warm laughter of his mother reached his senses. Her jingling voice traveled between the thick walls of the Hokage mansion like they were made of simple paper, and a small smile appeared on Naruto's face almost instantly. He could smell her sweet smell as it filled the whole house. The infallible smell of exotic vanilla. Then he heard as the bedroom door opened and closed, the hinges squeaked faintly between the walls. Then his father's smell filled his room even behind the closed doors. The smell of freshly cut grass and wet soil with a hint of cucumber. He let out a long breath, letting his heartbeat to slow down, while forcing his senses to settle down. He reached out for an unnoticeable amount of senjutsu, and suddenly his previously settled senses spread out in a well-known manner. He could feel their heartbeat rather than hear them, pulsing deep inside him. As they settled down and floated closer and closer to the edge of sleep, their two separately beating hearts slowly became one beat, so did Naruto's own heart fall into the rhythm. However, his unmoving form faltered when he found another presence inside his parents' room. A weak, tiny, almost unnoticeable presence. Betrayed by nothing else than the faint, but still fast heartbeat. A frown crawled up on Naruto's face, and as minutes passed, it became deeper and deeper. However, it slowly disappeared. Kurama, that is. A warm smile appeared on the fox's furry face. Yes. That is you. Naruto didn't react, just his face mirrored the same sunny expression. He reached out for nature once more, and his senses sharpened more. He felt his own unnoticeable chakra. He could feel his own tiny little beating heart. Then it slowly moved. Nothing more than mere millimeters, as his own presence may be influencing his sleeping. Naruto didn't notice the passing time until he felt Kurama's small tug from his consciousness. If we want to do it, we should do it now before Kushina drifts into the REM phase. Naruto hesitantly nodded, and after one last glance toward his small, developing body, he reappeared between the giant ashen trees with a big, happy smile on his face. Kurama eyed his companion for a second before he closed his eyes to reach out for his counterpart. The still grinning blonde watched him, and after a quick shrug he just mimicked him and also closed his eyes. Then, suddenly, everything became silent. The previous soft ruffling of floor around them was gone. He couldn't hear as the osiers tree's long branches brushed against each other, nor the whisper of the wind as it playfully slipped through them. Everything was gone. His eyes snapped open, only to find himself inside a yellowish void. He blinked faster and faster until he realized that the lazily whirling mist wouldn't disappear by it. A soft ruffle gained his attention, and he turned his head to note Kurama's giant form behind him and the grimace on his face as he stared up. Naruto traced his gaze, and he had to swallow a sharp breath when he spotted the fox's disturbance. A giant orb occupied his vision, and the other self of Kurama was pinned in the middle of it. Giant stalks strung out from each of his tails and limbs, and one even from his chest, while several chains restrained any other movement. He was there stretched out, but the angry and even confused crimson orbs were fixed on Kurama behind him. However, his composure didn't falter. Just his grimace turned into a smirk. It was even a little embarrassing. Well, just a little. You know, brat, it is true that I had complained a lot in the past that your seal was small and uncomfortable, but standing here and seeing my old place making my old complaints looks like a childlike tantrum. Naruto snorted and opened his mouth to retort, however the Kyuubi in front of him was faster, as he snapped. What's the meaning of this? We are here because this boy here wanted to talk to you. Kyubi narrowed his eyes and finally glanced down at the blond boy, who sent back a toothy grin in response and enthusiastically waved his hand. Yo Kurama too! Kyubi's only answer was an animalistic growl. However, Kurama watched his counterpart with calm, calculating eyes. He slowly raised behind Naruto and came closer to the seal, inspecting every single aspect of the Uzumaki seal until he settled down in front of him again, and somehow the orb seemed to drift closer and closer to him, and they soon found himself eye level to each other. Kurama made a small motion with his head and Naruto immediately hopped up to his fox's head. You've felt it from the very beginning, haven't you? That something is wrong, that you felt your own presence from outside but you couldn't grasp the meaning of it. Well, let me introduce this boy to you. This is Uzumaki Naruto. Our third. Son of our second. We came back. Crimson eyes narrowed into slits, his gaze flickered from his smaller mirror image to the blond boy on his head. Then after a tense second his barking laughter filled the emptiness around them. You think I'm a fool? That I'm going to believe you? No one can make a fool of the great Kyubi no Kitsune. You are not me. I would never allow a hairless monkey to even address me, and you are letting that freak of nature on your head? Don't make me laugh, you pitiful mirage. He is worse than you were in the beginning, Kurama. But I think it is understandable. It doesn't look very comfortable. Naruto pointed out with a grimace, however both the named fox and the ignored him. This boy here. It is him. The old man talked about him. And now he needs your help. The future where we came from is in great danger. They suddenly became silent, however Naruto looked down on his companion's head in confusion. He stared into the fuzzy head above in the hope that if he tried hard enough he could see through the thick fur and hard skull so he could see inside his friend's thoughts, and finally his previous statement would make sense to him. What are you talking about? Who is this old man? Naruto blurted out. However, he was ignored again. The two ancient old entities just watched each other silently for a long minute, before the Kyubi's crimson pupils drifted up to him. Time travel, huh? They let out a chuckle which somehow made the soft flake on Naruto's neck stand up instantly in alarm. Let's assume for a moment that I believe you. How would you convince me to help you? The blonde perked up. So you believe us? No. The dull answer came. Naruto narrowed his eyes and the previous pout was back again. The battle of wills began as both of the participants refused to avert their gaze from each other or blink. Azure orbs stared into crimson unflinchingly. However, Kurama stopped the battle before it could escalate any further. We will tell you everything. But first let's get rid of those spikes for some time. Before they could retort, the seal was gone from his flesh, his painful restraints simply disappeared from existence as their consciousness reappeared in the well-known empty void. However, the Kyubi could still distantly feel as the seal restrained his body and chakra from moving freely. The Nine Tails narrowed his eyes even more as he eyed his counterpart suspiciously. Then he simply turned around to show his back to his companions. Who said that I'll listen to you? I'm not interested in your story. You will listen to it if you want to or not. Kurama made an encouraging motion with his head to the sulking Naruto. The blond boy grimaced, his nose scrunched up in his displeasure, but in the end he let it go. Kurama. You don't have the right to call me by my name, Kyubi growled. Naruto paused and closed his eyes. He then made a silent decision and stepped in front of the still annoyed nine-tailed beast. Azure eyes bored into crimson ones. Then, to Kurama's great surprise, the time traveler bowed to the demon. Kyubi-sama. We need your help. Your life is in danger, as is the whole world. Without your help, destruction will spread across the world when the Jubi is revived. The Kyubi's face stayed blank, however a small amount of amusement still sparkled in his eyes. The great fox demon watched the bowing teen in front of him for one long and silent minute before he made his decision. So be it. I'll listen. But I'm not promising anything. Toriku, could you pass me the milk? Minato rasped out in a weak voice, and when he received the desired ingredient he eagerly poured it into his coffee. Naruto glanced toward his father from his seat next to the dining table. His eyes lingered on the messy blonde locks screaming for the help of a brush. Minato's always shining eyes were still dimmed by his dreams. And his pajamas were still on him, ruining the perfect picture of the fearsome Hokage, the only man who managed to get a flea-on-sight warning in the bingo books. Obviously that man wasn't a morning person. Just like Naruto's mother. Every morning was the same. She and his father dragged themselves down, and until they got their boost they were simply useless. A small smile tugged at the edge of his lips when Minato placed another cup of the steaming coffee on the table. A loud yawn interrupted his silent and peaceful morning. Naruto blinked toward his mother, who just stepped inside the room, continuously rubbing her eyes to finally get rid of the aftereffects of the night. Man, I had the weirdest dream ever. Kushina muttered while dragging herself to the nearest chair and simply dropped down, snatching her coffee like her life was depending on it. Naruto curled an eyebrow, patiently waiting for his mother to continue. Another tiff later she did so. It was about you, Toraku, and Kyubi. Naruto froze. But thankfully none of them saw his shocked expression as both of them were busy with their morning routine. Minato just hemmed in front of the stove and dropped one more egg into the pan while Kushina eagerly rubbed her eyes and let out a yawn before she continued. It was funny, because there were two demons. You were talking with the bigger one, while you were sitting on the head of a smaller one. I don't remember quite clearly. The blonde time traveler could feel as a small droplet of sweat started its way down his spine and Kurama also stilled inside the pit of his seal. Kushina made a wandering face before she continued. Then the Sandame appeared in green spandex and declared that from now on ramen is the mandatory meal on every Sunday. Kushina shook her head and a wide smile spread across her fine features. This wouldn't be a bad idea, would it? Naruto's previous tension was gone in the next blink. He sent back a beaming smile, and his loud laughter filled the small dining room in the next second. Katsuchi glanced to the side, where Yandame's brother currently occupied the counter beside him at the ramen stand. A troubled frown appeared on his face, as he observed the blond boy, measuring him up from head to toe, and silently watching his bickering with Shiko. Even though he is a foreigner, the gossip and whispering didn't evade his sensitive ears. A rumor that Orochimaru, the strongest of the three Sannin, is dead. And it was Toraku who killed him in cold blood. However, the named blonde wasn't aware of this gossip. But he was aware that something was wrong. That something felt different when he had been walking outside. He just didn't catch the edge of it. 10 minutes later the small group headed toward their real destination, to one of the empty training grounds where Shiko had been preparing for the final round of the Chunin exam for 3 weeks. Naruto slowly walked between the two foreign shinobi, his hands folded behind his neck in a casual way. No words were exchanged between the ninja as they wandered on the crowded streets. Azure blue eyes observed the crowd around them, hovering on a small girl with a soft smile on his face. The child sent back a beaming smile when she spotted the Chunin, but suddenly an arm wrapped around her in a protective manner, shrouding her from his sight. Naruto cocked his head to the side in confusion, as he noted the mother's restrained scowl. Cerulean eyes moved toward the woman's eyes and what he found there froze him to his very core. Glare. The woman glared at him. With the same hateful and pointed glare he received during his childhood from almost everybody. The same eyes looked back at him which haunted him during the first 12 years of his life. The blonde flinched a step backward, bumping into Shiko, almost pushing him to the ground. He also stopped and watched the blonde's widening eyes and shocked expression with a concerned face. Hey, what's wrong with you? Shiko snorted while he regained his composure, but he received no answer to his question. Naruto just shook his head, not sure in his own voice. The brownie commander stepped between him and the glaring woman, cutting off their eye contact without knowing. Toraku-kun? This kicked the stunned Chunin out of his temporary stasis. An annoyed expression spread across his face, and he pushed the shinobi out of his way and he continued his walk with increased speed, followed by the two confused IWA nin. Naruto's heartbeat increased, along with his breathing as he spotted more and more glaring civilians. Naruto the blonde didn't listen, instead increased his footsteps, and he soon found himself running, dashing among the people toward the training ground to flee from the glares. He leaped over a stand, lowering his height to land fluidly and instantly round a corner. But he suddenly found himself on the ground, nursing his throbbing forehead with one of his arms, as well as a child in front of him. Naruto shook his head to get rid of the dancing stars in his sight, the child in front of him also mimicking his attempt. The child's brown eyes suddenly widened when he realized who he just bumped into. Toraku-san! I was looking for you. Not now, Irika. Naruto muttered, still nursing his throbbing forehead. But it thankfully diverted his troubled thoughts. Two other shinobi joined them in the next second. Shiko stumbled across Irika, tossing the child to the ground again. Hey jerk! Watch where you are going! Irika shouted, pointing a finger to the stunned Chunin candidate. But Shiko wasn't stunned for too long, He sucked in a long breath to shout out his own retort to the insolent shrimp, but his intent was stopped when Irika suddenly jumped on his feet and rushed toward the blonde teen, his eyes wide and his eyes suddenly filled with fear. Is it true? Tell me they are wrong. Naruto made an annoyed grunt and shook his head once more before he straightened himself, sweeping the small hands from his vest. What are you talking about, Irika? My mom told me that I'm not allowed to meet with you ever again. Because she said to you that you killed a hero. Naruto's eyes widened, his head snapped toward the pleading small boy, his mouth falling open. He stumbled a step backward and his suddenly dry lips parted to answer, but no coherent word came to life. Tell me that they are lying. I told her that you would never do anything like that. That they are wrong. That you wouldn't kill Orochimaru-sama. You wouldn't kill a hero, would you? Naruto opened his mouth once more to answer, but when his eyes met with Irika's desperately pleading chocolate brown eyes, he knew that he wouldn't be able to lie to his future sensei. To the first person who had acknowledged him. He averted his gaze to look at the bricked wall, but there he had to face the observing eyes of Katsuchi. Naruto swallowed to get rid of the dryness of his throat and slowly glanced around, to note the more and more eyes around them. Civilians, shinobi, even an Anbu stood in the background eagerly waiting for his answer. The blonde shook off the child's hands which were desperately clutching his green chunin vest again. Irika. Tell me that they are wrong. Please. Irika. Please. The young Uzumaki crouched down to be eye level to the child and whispered his answer only to the child's ears. I'm sorry. Chocolate brown eyes widened with disbelief, as Irika shook his head in denial. No. I'm very sorry. Naruto whispered again, even lower. In the next second, Irika was nowhere to be seen as the small child launched himself into the gathered crowd. Naruto stared at the point where his sensei had disappeared, and he averted his gaze from the point only when he felt a hand on his shoulder. His brain was still numb, he hadn't been really able to process what had happened in the last 10 minutes. He glanced up to see Jiraiya's frowning face. Come. Minato summoned you. Naruto nodded and they disappeared from the middle of the crowd with a quick shunshin. Two pairs of identical azure eyes watched each other, one standing in the middle of the Hokage's office, the other sitting behind the desk, wearing the long white coat with the sign on his back, shouting away his identity. Some disturbing things are happening in the village. Naruto made a sour grimace and folded his arms across his chest. Yeah. I heard them. Actually, I heard them today for the first time. Minato made a half smile and glanced toward his former teacher. We had discussed the matter with Jiraiya and with Sarutobi, together with the Hokage's personal advisory body. We made a decision together. Minato gestured to the left, where Shikaku stood, arms crossed, eyes closed as he leaned against the bookshelves. The Nara had let out a weary sigh and opened his eyes. Someone has been leaking information about your incident with Orochimaru. Gossip started amongst the civilians and in the lines of shinobi. Naruto snorted and opened his mouth to retort, but when Nara raised his hand, he immediately shut it and let him continue. Someone is trying to break your reputation into small shards, together with Minato's. The Chunin exams and the Kage meeting are on our heels. In 6 days the first delegation will arrive and the first thing they will hear in the village is that a murderer is wandering the streets, while one of Konoha's strongest shinobi is gone. The blonde teen restrained a flinch at how Shikaku had addressed him. Minato also made a sour grimace and sent a pointed glare toward his Jounin commander, but he either didn't notice it, or simply ignored it completely. The timing is awful. Konoha and Minato can't show weakness in this period or the consequences could be disastrous. The rumors have been covering only half of the truth, that you have killed Orochimaru, but they don't know what he's done. There are 3 options we have. 1. We either pretend to lock you up until the exam is over, but still deny everything. Shikaku paused and glanced toward the stoically standing teen. Or we could leave everything as it is now as option 2. You will either be shunned from the village or you will soon leave by yourself. Nobody can endure that kind of treatment for long. Not even the strongest shinobi were able to endure that kind of air around them. Even the White Fang had broken under the pressure. Naruto made a sour grimace and shook his head before he spoke. And the third option? We stop the information blackout and unveil everything about the case. All of them have dangerous consequences for you. Shikaku observed the calm Chunin in front of him for a long and silent moment, then continued. If we lock you up or tell them nothing, the viewpoint of the citizens of Konoha won't change. However, you will be safer out the village gates without an official announcement. Both are just temporary solutions. Shikaku straightened himself and stepped in front of the young Chunin and looked straight into Naruto's eyes. In case option number 3, we unveil everything, the gossip will be stopped, your reputation in the village will be repaired. However, the other countries will be aware of your existence, about your potential as a future threat toward them and your connection with Minato. You will be in every single bingo book. Bounty hunters and assassins will be on your heels every time you step out from the village. Your life will be in continuous danger. Naruto stared at the commander for a long silent minute before he finally opened his mouth. And your decision is? The decision is in your hands. It's your life, Minato stated calmly. Naruto made a quick glance to his father before he looked back at his friend's father. Which is the best for Konoha? All options will show that Konoha's security is weak, letting Orochimaru to act that long in the shadows unperturbed. However, with the third option, unveiling your power will give the reputation of a new powerful shinobi to Konoha, balancing it again, with the cost of your security and maybe your life. I choose the third option, Naruto answered without hesitation, making Minato send a sour smile toward the stunned Jounin commander, who after a minute of observation smiled at Naruto. I see now what Minato and Jiraiya see in you. The will of fire burns inside you, brighter than in most of us. I would be honored if I got a Jounin in my lines like you. Naruto raised a confused eyebrow. What do you mean by that? The Jounin commander snorted and shook his head. And you can be as clueless as they said. Hey! Naruto yelled angrily and folded his arms in a sulking manner across his chest, and a pout immediately appeared on his lips. But Minato's soft voice made him glance toward his father. The official announcement should be made at the finals. Most of the village will be there. That is the best opportunity to clear your name. But if we do it there, all of the elemental nations will know about our relationship. The moment the announcement is made, your life will be in danger. You do realize what you have chosen, don't you? The blonde Chunin glanced toward his father with a determined expression. Of course I do. I can handle 1 or 2 assassins or filthy bounty hunters. Then his determination turned into a cheeky grin. Besides, I'm a super awesome shinobi, aren't I? One day, I'll even kick your ass, Minato. Naruto paused for a second. His face became distant. Experienced fingers brushed against the fine insignia of Konoha on his forehead, and in the next second his eyes sparkled with a new determination. You should look out for that fancy hat of yours. Because one day, I'll have that seat of yours as Hokage. The named village leader chuckled and shook his head, while the Nara clan head observed the whole situation with calculating eyes in the background. Finally Minato's chuckle died down. Sure. Maybe one day you will be ready for my hat. But for now, you have to bear the situation a little bit longer. It will be over soon. I promise. The blonde teen nodded to Minato, and in 10 minutes the young Chunin was gone after one last glance toward his father. The Nara head let out a loud hum as the gears turned in his mind. I was serious. Your brother is strong, and he definitely has the will of fire in him. And I also read the latest reports about his missions. He is a leader type. You should think about his promotion to Jounin. A proud smile appeared on Minato's face. Yeah. I know. He's ready for that title. And maybe a little later, he will be ready for another title if I'm going to retire. Shikaku raised an eyebrow. You just received your own title as Hokage and you are already looking for a successor? A sour smile spread across Minato's features. Being Hokage is a dangerous job. You have to be prepared for anything. It seems sometimes you just forget that he joined this village a little more than 7 months ago, with quite suspicious conditions, and you are thinking about nominating him as your successor in the future? Have you gone nuts? The leader slowly walked to the windows, folded his arms behind his back and looked down at the village before he answered. I can state that you are the smartest man in this village, Shikaku. You have read all the files about him. Tell me, what do you think about his case? The named man stayed in silence for a long minute, gathering his thoughts. If I stick only to the facts in the report, I would say that he isn't a spy, a sleeping agent, or an assassin. By the reports, his personality and his previous acts aren't fitting to any of the profiles of the previous cases. But Nara narrowed his eyes. But based on the reports, he shouldn't be able to take down Orochimaru. He was either holding back the whole time, or he really got a lucky hit. Theoretically, even one genin could kill a Kage if he got a lucky shot. Do you think he got a lucky shot? No. And this could point toward that he is indeed a powerful and seasoned soldier. A Kage-level shinobi who could kill a Sannin. Maybe even Minato. But if the report Jiraiya made was accurate, and I'm sure it was, then Orochimaru was his first kill. All of the symptoms he showed during these 3 weeks point toward that. But why should he hide so much power? Nara shook his head and frowned. I just don't know. Everything about him and his case is just damn confusing. Even for me. A victorious half-smile appeared on Minato's face as he turned toward his friend and advisor. Then why did you tell me that we should promote him to Jounin? The clan head opened his mouth to respond, but he closed it after one hesitant second as he found himself unable to find any logical answer. The smile grew bigger on the village leader's features. It's illogical, isn't it? You can't explain why, but when you are with him, you can feel it, can't you? There are no logical explanations for that. It's coming from deep within your soul. The feeling that you can trust in him. That you can put your life into his hands and you will be safe. When you're with him, you want to walk by his side. That is my answer. The clan head observed his leader for a long silent minute, then sent back an equally soft smile and stepped next to him to look down on the village at their feet. Your brother's going to be a very important ninja. Yes. Someone who will surpass all the previous Kage. Chapter 22. The strongest of all. Naruto, standing behind his father, glanced around the enormous council chamber, which was currently occupied by the strongest people of the whole shinobi world. All of them were sitting behind their hats, each of them announcing where they came from. He eyed the still old and still wrinkled face of the Tsuchikage and Katsuchi behind him, then his eyes moved toward the Kazekage, who acknowledged his attention with a small nod. His pulse then traveled toward Yashimaru, who observed him with calm and calculating eyes. However, they were much softer than the last time. Then he turned his attention to the delegation of the mist. Suikazen Fuguki was even bigger than Katsuchi, and Naruto could only see the hilt of Samahata strapped firmly on his back. Indeed, the member of the 7 swordsmen of the mist actually reminded him of a pufferfish. Beside him, the Mizukage looked like a small child. Yugura eyed him somewhat calculating and curiously. His pink eyes traveled between him and Minato from time to time. Lastly, he glanced up to the awkwardly young face of A, whose eyes were fixed on his father's form, sending sharp glares toward the also young leader. But Naruto paid most of his attention to the young man standing behind him with folded arms, so did this foreign shinobi eye him almost continuously. They stood there silently, each of them observing the other for their own reasons. B suddenly smirked at him, which kicked him out from the small world of his memories about the loud rapper. Shaking his head, he came back to reality with a wide grin on his face. However, almost everyone else in the room was tense beyond words beside the two. The guards' hands were continuously next to 1 or 2 hidden weapons, while each of the Kage had been observing the other with calculating and even sometimes cold eyes. Only Minato and the Kazekage shared one glance which wasn't full of suspicion, or in the case some of them even with flaming hatred. But despite all of the hostile feelings, the eyes deep inside sparkled with a small hint of respect for each other's power and curiosity at what the hell is going to happen. The Tsuchikage's old and wrinkled eyes finally traveled toward Naruto's own and made a face at the sight of the two blondes. Naruto couldn't fight down the urge, he sent a wide smirk in response at the grimace. One yellow flash was already more than enough. And now, here is a damn clone of him. Anoki muttered through his gritted teeth. The named blonde rolled his cerulean eyes and waved a dismissive hand at the aging man. I'm no clone of anyone, GG. The Tsuchikage snorted angrily, even rising from his seat, however it didn't help him to gain any height. The only thing he managed was to raise the already heavy tension in the room to an almost unbearable level as killing intent started to flow freely from the small village leader. Repeat what you said if you dare, boy. I can still kick you to the afterlife with my arms secured behind my back. Anoki even tried to lean above the long desk to weigh his threat toward the still grinning blonde boy, who didn't pick up the gloves. Minato let out a long and weary sigh, ran a hand through his golden locks, and opened his mouth to calm down the already pre-disaster mood. But the deep voice of the Raikage stopped him from doing so. The boy is right, Anoki. You are old. You should have retired ages ago. Just like the Sandaime. The killer intent raised even more, and one silent Anbu started to tremble like a leaf in one of the dark corners of the room. At least I don't look like a teenage boy who is trying to act like a kage. Another wave of killer intent flashed from the direction of the until now stoic Mizukiage, who also raised to his feet. Guards tensed until the breaking point behind their leaders, ready to defend them from any attacks. Hands hovered over hidden kunai, small katana ready to lash out in a blink of an eye if necessary. What did you just say about living fossils? The Mizukiage hissed, making the named fossil jump on the table with one graceful movement, giving a lie to the previous statement about his old age. Only Kitsuchi's hand on his shoulders restrained Tsuchikage from rushing to the other side of the room where Yugura was seated. A deep snort echoed all around the room, making all heads turn toward the smirking Raikage. I always loved free circuses. Don't bother yourself, continue. I'll just watch. You. Everybody calm down. All heads snapped toward the now annoyed Minato, whose voice echoed back and forth inside the chamber just like the Raikage's beforehand. The heavy air hung in the silent room threateningly, just like a guillotine above a condemned head. But all of the tension suddenly disappeared as Naruto couldn't stand the scene anymore and burst out with barking laughter. Do you think it's funny, boy? The Tsuchikage snarled with irritation, his eyes narrowing into slits, deepening the wrinkles around his eyes even more. Yeah. Actually, it is hilarious. You were bickering like small kids. Naruto choked out between two fits of laughter. You aren't helping me, Minato muttered behind his gritted teeth, slowly shaking his head. But after one last glance around the room, he had to admit that he was utterly wrong. The tension disappeared together with the pre-disaster mood. Despite all the eyes shining with irritation, the previous hatred toward the others was gone as they observed his relative, more curiously than threateningly. Naruto's chuckle finally died down slowly and he wiped the small tears from the corner of his eyes. Everything was so nostalgic. Their argument, their bickering. Just like when they got together in Suna after the first battle with them. Even as they were allies back then, they couldn't suppress the urge to insult each other just like small children on the playground would over a toy or candy. Power demonstration between the village leaders by pure instinct. It must be coded into the DNA of every leader or something. Minato-san is right. Act your age and stop insulting each other. We are here to talk, not to fight. The Kazekage spoke for the first time, making Anoki narrow his eyes even more. The Raikage snorted before he opened his mouth to retort. Since when is the Hokage only Minato-san to you, Kazekage-sama? Did you become Konoha's pet? Do you even frisk your tail and bow to him? The stern and stoic expression never left the fourth leader of Suna as he answered. Only one almost invisible twitch of his eyes hinted at his irritation. Minato-san and his brother provided a great service to Suna. I will bow to anyone who deserves my respect, Kage or not. The Mizukiage slowly sat down, his rose-tinted eyes observing the stern ones of the Kazekage curiously and with well-hidden confusion. What kind of service did Konoha give to you, Kazekage-sama? The named leader eyed the young shinobi for a long silent minute, weighing his thoughts before he answered. They fixed the seal of Suna's, and with it, saved the life of not only the vessel, but most likely the lives of my citizens. The seal was weak, letting Shikaku control the Jinchuriki's mind. Who knows what could have happened if Konoha had not intervened? Silence fell among the lines of the leaders, each of them processing the information the Kazekage had just given them. Thoughts raced inside their heads, gears moved continuously. A disbelieving snort filled the room, interrupting the silence. Anoki slowly sat down and leaned back in his seat, folding his arms together as he eyed the two blondes across the room. Why would they do that? What did you offer them for it? The bijou, I assume? You offered the power of your tailed beast in exchange? Naruto clenched his hands into fists and stepped forward, making the guards tense once more, and the four Kage shifted their attention to him. But in the end, it was Minato who opened his soft lips and answered with a calm tone, his chin casually resting on his folded fingers. It was free of charge. Anoki let out one more disbelieving snort. Yeah, and I will have a tea party with the Raikage after this meeting is over. Naruto folded his arms across his chest, but his hand squeezed the fabric of his vest hidden behind his elbow to channel down some of his irritation as he answered. I will do it free of charge for any village if I could help save a life. That is very honorable, young shinobi helping a fellow. Naruto glanced over the Mizukage, and his lips curved into a soft smile as he made a small thanking bow. Honorable but foolish. Handing a living weapon to an enemy is just foolish. The Tsuchikage muttered with irritation, but suddenly the room was filled with a thunderous bang as the Reikage slammed his fist onto the table, cracking the fine piece of furniture. Previously hidden weapons were unsheathed, muscles tensed until their breaking points within the lines of the guards. Only Naruto stood still behind his father, his arms still folded across his chest. The Reikage opened his mouth to bark out. You should know better than to call a living weapon Anoki. The ratio is quite high in this room. The old man gave an uninterested shrug after he glanced over at the Mizukage and B, who observed him with narrowed eyes as he slowly backed away with a grimace on his face. And it didn't know how right he was while another well-hidden blonde host restrained his snort with all of his willpower. Minato let out a weary sigh and shook his head in his displeasure. He traced his eyes over the village leaders once more before he finally slowly straightened himself on the chair. My fellow Kage, I would like to ask you to put aside your disagreements. The point of this meeting is to strengthen the village's bonds with each other, not to have petty arguments on trivial matters over and over again. I'm here to offer an alliance in the name of Konoha to all of you. Disbelieving snorts echoed inside the chamber from the Tsuchikage and the Reikage. Only the leader of Mist observed the young leader with calm and calculating eyes. So that is why you asked every village to participate today? To gather all Kage in one place and offer an alliance? Minato turned his head toward Yugura. No, it just came with the package. I would be foolish if I didn't utilize this opportunity. As if I will trust any of you. Anoki snarled and folded his arms across his small chest, eyeing every participant with narrowed eyes. The feeling is mutual, old geezer. The Reikage hissed through gritted teeth, mimicking the old leader's action as his eyes ran over each leader. The Mizukage, however, stayed in silence for a long minute, his gaze locked on Minato, trying to figure out what was happening inside the Hokage's head. What will you offer in case of an alliance? This kicked out the two cantankerous leaders from their small worlds. What? You can't be serious. Calm and collected pink eyes moved toward the stunned Reikage. I am serious. An alliance between Mist and Leaf is unheard of. I'm interested in what Konoha can offer. Minato leaned back on his seat casually as he answered Yugura's question. A new trade route between our nations. Help from my shinobi if you need it, or my personal help if it is necessary, just like it happened with the Kazekage. Minato glanced toward the silent leader of the sand, waiting for validation, which came in the form of a small, agreeing nod. No way I'm going to agree to this. I'd rather die than to ally with you, Anoki muttered, making Naruto frown and step ahead. Why? Why would you throw away an opportunity like this? You could help your people. All attention turned toward him almost instantly. The aging leader of stone narrowed his eyes as he observed the young boy. You're young, but you are old enough to live through the war between our nations. Would you just put aside every hatred and smile into your enemy's face like nothing had happened before? Konoha slaughtered my shinobi. Your Hokage over there himself killed hundreds of my people with his own hands. So did almost every participant in this room. How couldn't we feel hatred toward the other? You can't change everything like that. Naruto hardened his face, sheer determination appeared in the cerulean eyes, almost burning through the black orbs of Anoki. Forgiving someone is the first step toward a new world which is free of the circle of hatred. A new world which is free from murder, from vengeance, from the hatred you are currently feeling. You are a fool if you think that this is just so simple. Did you even hear what you were saying? Naruto turned his head toward the Reikage, who observed him with irritated eyes. But the blonde's determination only hardened rather than faltered by the piercing gaze he received. He already knew what to count on from the Reikage. A speech about power and that a shinobi should never bow to another that easily. Kuma will never bow to any of the other countries. The only thing a shinobi should respect is power. If we let this alliance be forged, we will become weak. And the weak will be crushed. I won't let Cloud fall that far. Naruto forced his face to stay stoic, and restrained the enormous urge to roll his eyes at his accurate predilection. You think allying with Konoha or any of the other nations here makes you weaker? Then the fool isn't me. It's rather you. Killing intent filled the council chamber as soon as the words left Naruto's lips. The Reikage slowly raised from his seat with dangerously narrowed eyes. The guards tensed again, and this time Minato also prepared to appear behind his brother and get him out of the furious Kage's way if necessary. But Naruto didn't seem to be concerned about the raised tension between him and the leader. He just continued. The best example of alliance is a genin team. You will first maybe fight against each other, annoy each other, even hate each other. But soon you will realize that you can do nothing alone. Some things can only be done if you've got friends and allies to stand beside you. You can find friends and allies in the most unthinkable places. In a rival. In an enemy. All of you are here because someone was helping you. Someone was pushing you over your limits to become Kage. The history of Shinobi is about power. About wars. The winner will be the most powerful nation. And that's it. There shouldn't be a compromise between ninjas. It's just a weakness. Hissed the leader of Cloud through gritted teeth, his eyes narrowed into slits by the growing irritation. Then what? Naruto snapped. You will start another war? Just to show you are more powerful than Konoha? Than Iwa or Kiri or Suna? Maybe you are strong, Reikage-sama, but there are a lot of strong people out there, even in this room, who can kick your butt easily if they work together. The Reikage narrowed his eyes even more if it's even possible, observing the young boy in front of him, while the village leader settled down to watch their encounter. Even Minato's until now tense and also worried features mirrored a great amount of curiosity, eagerly waiting to find out what his relative will make out of the mess he just created. You are talking nonsense. Who are you anyway? Namikaze Toriku, Chunin of Konohagakure no Sato. It was Minato who answered the question with a calm tone, gesturing toward Naruto, after he shot a calming glance to his relative. A Namikaze. My guess was right then. The Reikage muttered and folded his arms, his previous irritation slowly disappearing. Namikaze or not, you are just a lowly Chunin who knows nothing about power. You will have the right to speak if you reach a certain level of power. You are babbling the same nonsense as Jiraiya of the Sannin a long time ago. That the shinobi will understand each other. That one day, there will be someone who will bring peace to the world. I made a quick, almost invisible glance toward Minato, then snorted. Who would believe in such nonsense? Only a moron like him. You would be surprised, Reikage, how strong this lowly Chunin is. Minato stated once more with a calm tone, making the named muscular man to snort again in his disbelief. But Naruto just let go of the subject about him being weak as anger rose inside his chest, hearing the insults toward the Sannin he held so close to his heart during all these years. Then I am a moron. And I'm proud of it. Because I believe in what he believes. I believe that one day every shinobi will understand each other. And Iwa and Konoha, Suna and Kiri. Even Jinchuriki and the Bijou. And when that day comes, then real peace will fall upon the shinobi world, like Jiraiya said. You just have to take the first step toward it. But it can only be reached together and not alone. Torikoku-in is right. All eyes snapped toward the brawny form of Katsuchi, who until now stood silently in the background as he was supposed to be, making Anoki to narrow his eyes when he glanced over his shoulder to send a questioning glare toward the fighter. The Iwa commander's piercing gaze traveled toward the two blondes, before he fixed it on the floor. I believe in him. I had tried to kill him, to get vengeance on the Hokage. But it's over. We should seek peace and stop fighting over the past. During my stay here, my team became good friends with some from Konoha. With Torikoku-in. Even with Hokage-sama. And I realize that this is what I want. This peace is what I really want deep inside my heart, not vengeance. I myself stopped fighting over the past. I forgive. I forgive you, Minato-sama. Dark eyes glanced up finally from the room, to meet with cerulean pools of the stunned village leader. Slowly, the surprise was over and Minato stood up to give a deep, respectful bow toward the foreign shinobi, making almost everyone in the room to suck in a surprised breath. Thank you, Katsuchi-san. I feel honored. Somehow, not even the Reikage interrupted the meeting after this. There were no loud arguments, no more bickering as every village leader somehow settled into another state of mind, all of them watching the blonde teen behind the Hokage with a calculating eye. Naruto glanced toward Shiko, who was currently eyeing Killer Bee as he stoically slurped his ramen at the other side of the counter at Ichiraku. The three shinobi, each from another nation, sat side by side peacefully, and Naruto couldn't shake off the urge to grin like an idiot at the out-of-the-way scene. Iwa, Kumo, and Konoha. The shinobi from those three nations held the greatest grudge against each other, and still here they are, eating and casually chatting like nothing had happened in the past between the three nations. The meeting went surprisingly well after his interference. However, Kurama never stopped his almost continuous displeased grumble about him stepping in. Even if it hadn't ended with an instant real alliance like back then, at least none of the Kage jumped at each other's throats. They listened to each other, they spoke with each other. Even Anoki and A weren't continuously bickering. Well, at least not all of the time. Finally, Naruto's cerulean pool settled on the younger form of his former teacher, comrade and friend, and the blonde host glued his eyes on Killer B. The rapper, after the meeting was over, had sneaked away from the observing eyes of his brother, leaving behind one of his ink clones to guard his relative, who actually thought that he guarded the loud-mouthed soldier more than vice versa. The Kumo Nin wandered around Konoha alone, however every twitch of his fingers was followed by a whole ANBU squad silently in the shadows. That was when he bumped into Naruto and Shiko. Okay. It wasn't actually a real accident, more likely the result of well-composed timing from the blonde. A sudden familiar presence appeared behind Naruto's back, kicking him out from his musing, but also making B tense when Minato casually sat down next to the only empty seat between the named and the Chunin wannabe, making the scene even more dreamlike. You should go back, B-san. The Raikage will soon realize that you've snuck out. The tension slowly disappeared from the named Jinchuriki as he casually shrugged off the advice. If it's about him, he would just lock me up in a safe house. That Bakayaro. B muttered into his bowl. Feeling wary in an alien village is normal. Minato answered in the same casual way, setting his triangle hat onto the counter, then stretching his arms behind his back with a satisfied moan. Then he felt a small tug on his long white coat. Minato-sama, the named Hokage, blinked and glanced down to Shiko with a questioning expression on his face, waiting for the boy to continue. When will I finally get the spar you promised me? Everybody went silent for a second, the chopsticks frozen in midair in the hand of Kumos. The soft chuckle of Minato finally kicked him out from his surprise, slowly lowering his hands to shoot a disbelieving glance toward the boy. The Hokage of Konoha promised you a spar? You of all people? A genin of IWA? Shiko grimaced and folded his arms across his chest in a sulking way, before he retorted. Yeah, why is that so hard to believe for everyone I tell? B let out a snort which in the end transformed into a loud laugh. Maybe because it is really hard to believe? The Kumo fighter shook his head and shot another glance toward the softly smiling Naruto. But I shouldn't be surprised. Weird things are happening between Konoha and the other nations. Suna suddenly supported the leaf, and the second head of Iwa's forces bowed to the Hokage. His eyes settled again on the now widely grinning blonde Chunin, with a wondering expression on his face. And somehow I also can't fight off the urge to meet again with you. Even my companion told me to do so. He thinks you are an interesting one. Naruto raised a curious eyebrow, but his grin never faltered. Gyuki was always disturbingly observant. See what you've done? Now even Kumo is way too interested in you than I would be pleased with in this timeline. Kurama grumbled in his mindscape, his tails were continuously swaying behind his back in a restless manner. The time traveler restrained a wince, when one tail hit the soddy ground of his consciousness in an attempt to channel down the fox's frustration. You can speak with it? Minato glanced to the side with a curious expression on his fine features. Him. Be corrected. What? Minato queried a confused eyebrow. It's him. The Hachibi is a male. And to answer your question, Hokage-sama, yes. I can speak with him. And he has quite an opinion about you too. It was now Naruto's time to snort, but it soon morphed into a soft chuckle. I would be interested in Gyuki's opinion about Minato. Gyuki? B tilted his head to the side in a questioning manner. Now all of his attention was focused on the blonde Chunin. You said that you were talking and you never asked his name until now? Naruto chuckled once again, not really concerned by the raised eyebrow of his father, nor his observant gaze. We aren't in that kind of good relationship. B muttered and shrugged before he continued. Even if it's better nowadays, he still keeps calling me bastard, idiot, or something like that. Another snort bubbled out from the blonde, which soon morphed into a fit of laughter, closing him into his own small world, not aware of the increased eyes on him. This was the point where Shiko lost his patience, and interrupted the two men by a loud snort. What are you talking about? Hey, Shiko-kun. Don't you think you should be heading to the stadium? Naruto said, diverting the conversation after he glanced up to the sky, noting the sun's position. The Chunin wannabe also glanced up but shrugged casually. Yeah, I do. But you are also still here. Why should I worry if the Hokage is also here? They won't start the exam without him, or you. A cheeky smile spread across Minato's face. Shiko-kun. You are forgetting something. The named genin raised a doubtful eyebrow. I can be there in a blink of an eye with Toraku. But I can't say the same about you. You wouldn't do it. The genin started in a casual way, but seeing the widening grin on Minato's face, threatening to simply split it in two, his confidence faltered. The small stand was filled with the tinkle of coins as the blonde Chunin dropped them on the counter, with his father's hands on his shoulder, and an equally wide and cheeky sneer on his face. Try us. In the next blink both Minato and Naruto were gone, with a flash of their golden locks, leaving behind a stunned and a shocked genin with an open mouth. It took several seconds before the Chunin candidate hurled down from his seat to start dashing through half of the village. B was left there alone, staring at the entrance of the ramen stand for several long minutes, before he shook his head slowly. So, Gyuki right? The blonde, tan-skinned nun suddenly winced to something only he heard, shaking his head once again. Definitely Gyuki. B muttered to himself before he also headed toward the arena to join the already gathering crowd. Naruto glanced around himself again, noting the immense amount of shinobi and future customers all around the viewing area. Lords, wealthy business people, and nobody could know what kind of place the others held all around them. Based on the fancy clothes, even a daimyo could be one of them. The arena was so crowded that not even the child version of Gamakichi could sneak through the people easily. Even as he stood in the background of the wide balcony, which was occupied with the strongest people of the nations, he could feel some glares he received from the crowd on his side. Shiko had burst through the crowd 10 minutes ago, dumping a long chain of profanities on him. But now, he was panting at the upper part where the Chunin candidates were preparing for their match, and nothing distracted his thoughts anymore. The blonde time traveler was nervous beyond words, despite his composed outlook. He had already gotten into an argument with Kurama 2 times in the last 10 minutes because of his anxiety. He couldn't restrain the sudden flinch when Minato reassuringly tapped his back, before stepping next to him to run his eyes along the crowd. Are you alright? Naruto opened his mouth to answer, but when no words came out from his sour and dry throat he instead nodded. An understanding smile appeared on Minato's face. It's time to make the announcement, and also open the exam. Naruto nodded once again instead of opening his mouth to answer. The young village leader made one last glance over his shoulder where the other 4 Kages sat on the wide balcony. Minato cleared his throat and stepped to the edge of the parapet, making the until now loudly clattering crowd to slowly become silent. The yellow flash of Konoha waited for a long silent minute, waiting to gather every single person's attention, before he talked. His voice echoed, filling the whole stadium in an instant. People of Konoha and all other nations, thank you for coming to watch the Chunin selection exam. Candidates arrived from all across the shinobi land to display their skills and suitability. But before we start the main tournament matches, an important occurrence has to be announced. Minato let the words sink in as murmurs spread across the crowd, letting them die down before he continued. Orochimaru of the Saiyans is dead. The people around them suddenly exploded as one man, forcing an annoyed and irritated expression on the leader's face as he had to stop before he could really start his speech. Even the 4 Kage couldn't suppress the urge to start talking with their companion. Minato waited for a long minute, but when the disbelieving and angry shouting, murmuring and whispering didn't decrease, killer intent started to leak from his body, filling the whole stadium in a blink of an eye, making every attendant shut his mouth. As I said, Orochimaru of the Saiyans is dead. However, I hereby preclude Orochimaru from ever being called a citizen or shinobi of Konoha, and I declare him a missing nin. The last remains of murmurs instantly died. We have discovered that he has done many terrible things. Things that should never have happened. Orochimaru had been performing unlawful and immoral experimentation on innocent men, women and children. He killed hundreds. His sins will never be forgiven. His remains will be destroyed and placed onto an unmarked grave. Minato's voice filled the silent stadium once more. He was killed and punished in a one-on-one battle with my brother, Namake's Toraku. Minato gestured toward Naruto, and waved a hand for him to come closer. The blonde Chunin gulped and hesitantly obeyed, slowly stepping next to his father. His short advance was followed by thousands of eyes, stabbing into his guts, but the piercing gaze of the 4 Kage was the most intense on his back, making the 4 or 5 steps last almost an eternity. We were damn lucky back then. So damn lucky, Kitsuchi muttered with wide eyes, more to himself than to his leader next to him. His eyes were glued on the Chunin's tense back. I hereby give the rank of Jounin to Namikaze Toriku. Unnatural silence filled the stadium in the next moment. Not even nature dared to make any noise around them, as the information sunk in. Then a loud shout filled the whole stadium in the next moment, echoing back and forth in the silence. I told you that you are all wrong. See? He is a damn hero. I told you that there must be something in the background. Irika yelled with the full force of his lungs, forcing a small smile on Naruto's face. As soon as the echo of his future teacher died down, the crowd exploded again, and this time the murmurs, conversations and excited yelps didn't falter for long minutes, to Minato's annoyance. When they finally did, the Hokage cleared his throat again. The main tournament matches shall now begin. Naruto didn't move, he just stood there with a wide grin frozen on his face, listening to the new murmurs spreading across the people all around him. Only when Minato poked him hard in his ribs did the grin falter from his face, giving space to an embarrassed smile. Don't let the glory foggy your mind. Naruto shot back an annoyed gaze, before he gracefully landed on the shore of the arena, to face the 8 stunned Chunin candidates. Shiko gazed at him with an open mouth, while the rest of the genin in front of him also observed him somewhat disbelievingly, somehow suspiciously. Only one pair of eyes ate him with hate, then it morphed into disbelief and denial, but in the next blink all emotion was gone from Anko's pupilless light brown eyes as the small girl composed herself in seconds, pushing aside her troubled thoughts. Shiko, finally shaking off his surprise, glanced around nervously. His brown eyes flickered from the small colorful waterfall toward the emotionless eyes of Anko. Then he glanced around, noting the other participants next to him. One from Cloud, one more young boy from Konoha, looking quite sick with those dark rings under his eyes, he noted to himself. His silent teammate on his other side, the reserved and stoic one from Sand, and the girl from Mist, who silently stood a little away from everybody else, her eyes cautiously observing every single twitch of the others. 8 participants stood there, waiting for the newest Jounin of Konoha to finally call for the first 2 names. A wide grin spread across Naruto's face, threatening to split it in 2 as he ran his azure eyes along the line of the excited children. With one last encouraging smile, he called for the first 2 participants, naming Shiko's teammate and Anko. Before the others left the arena to prepare for their own fight, Naruto crouched down next to Anko, who carefully avoided looking up from the ground, even as Naruto eyed her from only centimeters. Anko-chan. Naruto called softly, making the girl glance up, expression as emotionless as ever. But her eyes still looked betrayed beyond words. No words were exchanged between them, only their eyes spoke to each other until Anko finally opened her lips. I'm all right, Torika-san. I can handle it. Naruto made one last glance toward the emotionless face of the girl and nodded. I believe in you. Suddenly Anko's dead eyes shone with a surprised flame, before it was gone again after a small nod. Only when all the participants left the arena did Naruto step in front of the 2 candidates. All right. I want a clear fight. No killing is allowed. A minute later both genin burrowed themselves in an intense taijutsu match. Minato watched as his relative silently stood on the edge of the wide balcony, his eyes and all of his attention glued to the battle at his feet, muscles tensed, hands on the last sign of a seal so he could instantly step in before something went wrong. Meanwhile the IWA genin shot another series of shuriken toward Anko as a distraction, making the Tsuchikage let out a pleased snort when Konoha's Chunin contender barely saw through the distraction. A lowly Chunin of Konoha managed to kill Orochimaru of the Sannin, the Reikage muttered, gaze also glued on the battle at their feet, but he still shot a quick glance at the back of the blonde Jounin. It seems you were hiding a great weapon during the war, Hokage. Why? Minato stayed in silence for a long minute, watching as earth spikes rushed toward Anko before he answered. Because Torika wasn't part of the village during the war. The Tsuchikage let out a disbelieving snort. Yeah, he just fell from the sky, didn't he? You were training him in the shadows, weren't you? Let's play with open cards. Why did you hide him during the war? We found him in autumn of last year. He appeared from nowhere, bloody, wounded, without memories. Minato stated calmly, eyes still fixed on the battle. And you just let a Kage-level shinobi, who appeared out of nowhere, join your village? The Mizukage asked curiously, pink eyes glued on Minato instead of the fight, noting the small smile on the Hokage's face. Minato finally averted his gaze from the two genin to glance up to the other Kage with an emotionless face. Well, he was either a gift from Kami or one of you had sent him here to infiltrate the village and assassinate me. The blonde leader scanned the other four Kage with a stoic expression, looking for any hint. But none of them showed what he was looking for with his remark. All of the others did the same, looking askance at each other, searching for the one who had ordered the assumed assassination. Minato's formerly expressionless face moved into a pleased smile. At least I thought so in the beginning. Nowadays, I stick with the Kami's gift version. The crowd around them suddenly became silent, the air heavy and suspenseful. Then in the next moment the people exploded with amusement and burst into applause. The five Kage blinked down, noting the unconscious figure laying flat in the middle of the battle arena. Anoki let out a sigh and slowly shook his head, watching the medics as they transported his blacked-out Chunin candidate away. Naruto slowly shook his head in displeasure. Shiko's teammate pulled out an impressive move, however he was foolish and got caught inside his own attack instead of Anko, knocking himself unconscious. The newest Jounin of Konoha reappeared in the middle of the field, to call for the next two participants. An hour later, four figures stood silently in the middle of the battlefield. Shiko, Anko, Waterfalls, Fu, and the silent genin from Mist with long straight black hair. What was her name? Megumi. Yeah, definitely Megumi. Naruto mused silently. The blonde time traveler glanced up to the balcony, waiting for his father to call up the second round. Dear attendees, the second round of the Chunin selection exam shall begin. However, this time we made some changes. Instead of one-on-one fights, the next round will be a team match. The crowd exploded once again, so did the other Kage behind Minato. What? Team match? You heard me well, Mizukage-sama. The Hokage responded softly, without looking back. Mitarashi Anko from Konoha and Megumi from Kiri. Step forward. A small smile spread across Minato's face when the two girls did so. From now on, you are a team. Your opponents will be Shiko from IWA and Fu from Takigakure. If someone is knocked out, the other team will be victorious. You have got 10 minutes to discuss your tactics, before the fight begins. Minato didn't wait for the stunned genin to gather themselves, he just casually walked back to his seat. His movement was followed by the equally stunned village leaders. We haven't received a word regarding this twist. It's unheard of. Anoki stated with obvious annoyance in his voice. It was Torika's idea. A good shinobi never leaves a comrade behind. The purpose of this exam is to reduce the distance between the nations. And this is the best way to do so. The yellow flash answered casually, with a wide, cheeky smile on his face. He watched as the four candidates finally shook off their surprise, but their eyes were still scanning their new teammates suspiciously. There are too many surprises during this Chunin exam for my liking. The Reikage muttered, his chin resting in his palms as he also observed the two temporary teams at his feet. None of the other Kage stated that they actually very much agreed with the leader of Cloud. At least for once. When the 10 minutes were gone, the participants lined up in front of each other to begin the last match. Muscles and nerves tensed until the breaking point, waiting for one last sign from Naruto to finally begin. And when it came with one loud yell, the outline of the stadium and onlookers within blurred for them as they dashed toward each other. With one swift movement of his arms, Shiko shot a set of razor-sharp kunai toward Anko, who easily dodged the rain of weapons. However, only her temporary teammate's sharp eyes saved her from a sneak attack. Razor-sharp wind chakra shaved the place smooth where a second ago Anko's opponent stood, making the Chunin contestant swallow down her previous cockiness. Without the silent, black-haired girl's help, she would be knocked out. With one thankful nod toward the Mist Genin, they flung into action again, but this time together. Shiko hissed a curse through his teeth, while dodging a side kick from Megumi, but from the corner of his eyes he could still see as the small mint-green-haired girl from Waterfall struggled under the punches her opponent gave her. Without a second of consideration, he jumped to give a helping hand to his teammate. He landed just in time to deflect an attack from Anko. They suddenly found themselves back to back. A wave of summoned snakes rushed toward them suddenly, their arms clung together to fluidly dance out from the attack's way with each other's help like a seasoned team would do. A small smile forced its way onto Naruto's until now concentrating face, seeing the sudden cooperation between the genin. He could feel the annoyance behind him from the four Kage, but also the curiosity leaking behind it, directed both toward him and the battle at their feet. Fists met with fists, kunai and shuriken met, filling the arena with sharp clinks as metal met metal, the music of a shinobi fight with its sometimes unpredictable, sometimes mystical, and sometimes rhythmic beat. Jutsu struck against each other, sending dust and debris all over the battlefield. Naruto suddenly narrowed his eyes when Anko's pleased snort echoed all over the walls, as Fu's small body started to slowly tremble, then sway like she was slowly losing consciousness. A small snake snuck out from under her clothes before the small dropped to the ground. Shiko was fast enough to catch her body, before her head could meet with the hard ground, his chocolate brown eyes suddenly filled with concern. Naruto let out a sigh and slowly shook his head. They had been applying such good teamwork. But Anko was indeed as sneaky as her late teacher. The blonde let his hand finally release the technique which had been ready to be triggered, letting his hands fall at his sides to get some rest. But they couldn't get it. Malicious intent rushed over them in the next second, tension raising high, people desperately looking for the source of their sudden uneasiness. Only Naruto's eyes were wide and locked on the small unconscious mint-head girl. Before anyone could move, vicious yellow chakra surged out from the small girl's laying form. Freely flowing, hovering, twisting and writhing in the air like it was a living thing. Naruto didn't think so when another surge of power rushed out from the small girl, sending the Chunin wannabes flying to three corners of the compass rose. A clone popped into existence, rushing toward Anko, while the real Naruto grabbed the small girl from mist. Naruto looked to the side where his father had caught Shiko, sharing a quick glance. Fu! Don't give up! Fight! Naruto desperately tried to channel his thoughts toward the small girl inside the vicious chakra storm. Suddenly the crowd exploded into screams as they shook off their temporary stasis. Civilians surged out from every entrance of the arena, but their place was taken by countless shinobi. An ANBU appeared next to Minato waiting for their leader to give his order. Get the civilians out of here. We will take care of it. The masked man hesitantly took a step toward his leader and opened his mouth to argue, but another vicious chakra spike made him forget his intentions and instead he disappeared to finally obey. The Kazekage straightened from his seat, his movement was followed by 7 pairs of eyes. Where are you going? The real show is just starting, grunted the Reikage. Gaara's father shot a glare behind his shoulder and jumped up to the edge of the balcony. I'm repaying my debt. Before the Kazekage could say anything else, Katsuchi stepped next to him, to observe as the two blondes were shouting to each other trying to bring about a plan and to get closer to the source of the malicious energy which was blocking their sight of the small child. What the hell are you doing, Katsuchi? You are here to watch my back. The burly shinobi let out a sigh. You are more than capable of taking care of yourself for 5 minutes. But they need help. And I'm going to help them. What's wrong with everyone here? The leader of Kyumo snorted and fidgeted in his seat to get a more comfortable position to enjoy the upcoming show. But to his great surprise, Mist's leader also raised from his seat and casually walked up next to the Kazekage. What are we waiting for? One of my genin is down there. The Kazekage eyed him for a short second then nodded and jumped down, strictly followed by the other two and landed gracefully between the two blondes. So what's the plan? Yagura turned to Minato with a questioning look on his face, but his eyes sparkled with excitement. It seems that Anko's summoner's poison is affecting the seal. The poison seems to confuse chakra diffusion, and it would also appear that the seal is breaking due to the lack of chakra circulating in it. If I can get close enough, I can use one of my seals to straighten it. My gold dust can restrain Shikaku's power. I should at least be able to slow down the 7-tailed beast. My coral palm technique could also help you in that. If anything goes wrong, I can still use the Bijuu's power. Hey, this seems like a good party to me. Can I join? Someone interrupted them from the background and Naruto couldn't help but smile as Bi stepped next to him. 5 Kage-level shinobi and not to mention 3 of them were in control. It was more than enough to lull the 7-tailed beast back to his slumber. Naruto glanced up to the balcony where the Reikage and the Tsuchikage still occupied their seats, with an irritated expression on their faces. Naruto gestured with his head in an inviting manner, but all he received from the other 2 leaders was a snort and slightly turned heads with noses scrunched in a sulking manner. But instead of being disappointed, he just laughed. He glanced at the other 5 shinobi. 1 from each of the big nations, discussing their tactics like a real team. It was already much more than he imagined. A roar interrupted his musing as with one last chakra spike an otherworldly creature appeared in the middle of the arena. Its form was stuck between a human and a giant beetle, three tails flung freely behind its back. But thankfully it was unmoving. A scroll appeared from Naruto's pocket instantly, and not a second later a purple barrier appeared around the whole arena, locking away the bijou. So gentlemen? What are we waiting for? No one said anything, he only received some annoyed glares. But in the next second, their forms blurred out from existence. 5 people reappeared around the awakening bijou, each of them already ready to attack or deflect. Gold dust spread across the battlefield as soon as Yagura's palm connected with the bijou's bare back. Faint pink coral started to grow while hard ground mixed with gold dust whirling around the beast, grabbing all 6 of its feet to steady it in place. A tentacle shot forward in the same moment, squeezing the bijou harder to stay in place. Minato reappeared on the tentacle and raised his hands to slam it and place his seal, but before it could happen, another wave of vicious energy dismissed the restraints in the next instant. Yagura jumped backward and raised a curious eyebrow. It's stronger than I thought. It must be quite pissed off. Naruto nodded in agreement and jumped next to his father. But before any of them could say a word, the bijou let out a loud roar and soon another tail came into existence. But the creature was thankfully still standing still, like it was waiting for something to happen. Minato frowned. Why isn't it attacking? It's Fu. She is still trying to restrain the bijou. Naruto noted. Or much more guessed. But based on Kurama's agreeing nod, he was actually right. It doesn't matter. Let's get this over with. The Kazekage stated. A black ring appeared around his eyes, while his hands were blurred as he made the hand signs with insane speed. But before he could finish it, strong hands stopped his movement as soon Naruto realized what the Kage was about to do. You can't kill the host. Fu is still there, fighting for control. The Kazekage narrowed his eyes, observing the team, but in the end, to everybody's surprise, he nodded and took a step backward. Suddenly another roar echoed inside the high walls. Vicious intent flowing over the place once again. Naruto swung his head toward the bijou, grabbing the 2 nearest persons instantly, and only his speed saved them as a razor-sharp stinger rushed toward where they stood a second ago. Debris and dust flew across the landscape, shrouding their vision. With one swift movement of Naruto's wrist, wind chakra surged from his palm, clearing their line of sight instantly. And what he found behind the dust made him freeze in place. A thick ice wall was shrouding his vision with an enormous tree chunk sticking out from the middle of it, where he knew the Mizukage had jumped. The named leader was just standing there, his eyes wide, surprise written all over his face. Naruto glanced to the side, looking for the Houston user. The small black-haired Chunin candidate from Kiri stood firm on the ground. Her heavy breathing echoed all around them, small hands still clutching the last hand sign of her jutsu. Yagura finally also spotted the black-haired girl. Their eyes met for a moment, and the girl froze, her eyes widened by pure terror and fear. The Mist leader held the eye connection only a second more, then smiled at the girl and sent a thankful nod. Naruto glanced toward the frozen Shiko and barked out in a commanding tone, holding out a small paper tag toward him. Shiko! Get Anko and Megumi and retreat. Your job is over. Channel some chakra into the tag and stay out of the way. The Chunin candidate shook off his terror and slowly nodded. In the next second, he grabbed the 2 girls and rushed toward the back of the stadium with the paper tag in his hands. Another purple barrier came into existence in the next second around the 3 genin. There was no time for more words. Another tail threateningly started to grow on the bijou's back. Yagura jumped into action together with the others. Gold mixed with soil again, hardening it this time like diamond around the 6 legs. More tentacles shot forward to wrap around the bijou's form again. And this time, lightning surged forward with insane speed from a giant electric dragon as the Raikage jumped next to Naruto. It was a pain to watch how you were struggling. The blonde time traveler sent a wide grin in response, watching as his father reappeared again above the bijou, slamming his palm onto its back. An ink-black pattern spread across the scarred ground. The tension slowly started to disappear. Naruto watched as the vicious chakra slowly started to fade away, until the small burned body of Fu became visible. Naruto immediately jumped toward the girl, before she could hit the ground. He gently placed her down, foggy orange eyes looking up to him. Hey! It's all right now. A small smile appeared on the girl's weary face. I heard you. I heard you all the time shouting at me to not give up. To fight, she whispered. A wide grin spread across Naruto's face. He took a step back as soon as the first medic arrived, but the soft smile never left his face. But his peace was interrupted when a body slammed into his own, almost making him tumble to the ground. Naruto glanced down to find the trembling Shiko, tightly clutching his waist in an attempt to calm some of his fear. Naruto didn't say a word, only patted his brown crown in a soothing way. "You did well, Shiko," Naruto murmured. However, the genin didn't respond by words. Shiko sniffed and nodded, his face still carefully shrouded by the blonde's waist. They stayed like that for long minutes until the child gathered himself. "I thought I was going to die. You too. And Kitsuchi-jiji. And Minato-san. And everybody." Shiko finally murmured through the fabric of Naruto's vest, making Naruto's smile even softer. "We aren't as soft as you think, you know." The genin finally released him and sent an annoyed glare through his watery eyes, breaking all of his previous tension into tiny shreds. Shiko narrowed his eyes when Naruto started to snicker, and he gathered a lungful of air to hail a long round of swearing toward the blonde time traveler. Kitsuchi stepped next to his leader at the balcony, who was currently watching the scene with an unreadable expression on his face. Anoki didn't know what to think anymore, or what to feel. So he decided to ignore his thoughts and emotions until he finally figured out what to think about today's happenings. His eyes trailed toward the Reikage, who was currently obviously scolding his brother for interrupting. Then his pools moved toward his genin, desperately hugging the young Namikes, while Minato watched the scene with a soft smile on his face from the corner of his eyes, as he was currently in a conversation with the Kazekage and the Mizukage. The wrinkles around his mouth twitched as the smallest smile started to tug his lips upward. Anoki let out a sigh and shook his head, forgetting about his commander next to him. But when Kitsuchi's baritone cut into the air, he immediately regretted his slip. "It's a nice view, isn't it?" The old leader stayed in silence for long minutes, the innocent question left almost forgotten in the air, until the Kage finally answered by a soft whisper. Maybe more to himself than to his commander. "Yes. It is." Four genin stood straight in front of the strongest people of the elemental countries, filling the council chamber once again, observant eyes glued on their nervous forms. Finally, Minato decided that the tension had risen high enough, so he straightened from his seat and a proud smile appeared on his face almost instantly as he ran his sight on the tensed genin one last time before he opened his mouth and his confident voice filled the until now silent room. "Shiko from Iwagakure no Sato. Please step forward." The Chunin hopeful did so after a gulp. "Fighting against hatred is the hardest, but you managed to do so. I hereby give you the rank of Chunin because you had shown flawless teamwork and the instinct to protect your team during the fight." Minato sent a warm smile, holding out a small scroll for the IWA soldier. Shiko let out a revealed sigh. He fought down the trembling of his legs and slowly walked to get the scroll with a wide grin on his face, which stayed in place even when he moved back to the line. The old Anoki couldn't fight the urge, his lips also curved up into an almost invisible smile. "Midarashi Enko from Kanahigakure no Sato." Enko straightened in an instant. "I hereby declare you as a Chunin. Staying calm and collected in even the hardest of situations is essential during a fight. You've earned my respect for that." Minato's smile widened as he handed over the scroll to the purple-haired small girl. He turned his head toward the silent girl from Mist. "Yuki Megumi. I hereby declare you as the newest Chunin of Mist. Keeping an eye on your surroundings and protecting your leader while facing an opponent far stronger than you is something which has to be acknowledged." The dark-haired girl twitched, and after a thankful bow, she went back to her place with graceful steps. However, her eyes drifted toward Yagura uncertainly from time to time. Minato stood in silence for a long tense minute, eyeing only the remaining genin. The mint-head girl fixed her eyes on the floor with carefully restrained emotions. Fighting against a bijou is hard even for a Kage. The mint-head genin twitched, eyes still carefully averted. If the genin is doing the same, it is honorable. Minato's smile softened. Fu from Takigakure. The named finally painfully slowly raised her head to meet with a pair of azure pools. "As I said, fighting against a tailed beast is an honorable feat, so I will honor you with the rank of Chunin." The mint-head girl opened her mouth, her eyes widening in disbelief. She gaped for a long minute, unable to squeeze any sound or air from her stressed lungs until she finally found her lost voice. "But I didn't fight. It was my fault and—" "You didn't fight with jutsu. You fought with willpower," Minato interrupted. You have to have a strong will to resist the taunting of the power of a bijou, against the hatred they are feeling against humanity. The small mint-head girl shook her crown, her green locks following the movement, gracefully swinging together with her head in the motion. It just wanted to fly freely, high up to the sky until it could touch the clouds. It didn't want to hurt anyone. It just wanted freedom. But I was too afraid to let it go and... A blonde eyebrow raised curiously until it reached Minato's forehead protector. He glanced toward his brother, who until now silently stood at the back of the room, his eyes closed and only a small smile on his face indicated that he was indeed listening the whole time. The leader mimicked the warm expression as he turned back to the newest chunin of Waterfall. Then maybe you should speak with it. Fu snapped up her head, eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. The yellow flash of Konoha made a side glance once more at his relative before he continued. A young man once said that the time will come when every shinobi will understand each other. Even the bijou and its. First we have to know more about them to understand them. Naruto's eyes flung open, azure pools were fixed on his father's back. Then his expression relaxed into a soft smile. Fu eyed the leader for a moment, then blinked away her confusion. In the end, she hesitantly nodded and made a deep bow. I will, Hokage-sama. Silence fell over the council chamber, each leader observing their chunin with a proud expression. Then they slowly started to move and leave the room until only Yagura and Megumi were left behind, together with some lurking ANBU hidden deep inside the shadows. The Mist leader eyed the girl for long minutes, who didn't dare to move or look up to her leader. The young Kage finally let out a long sigh and stepped in front of his newest chunin. I still don't know if you are brave or just simply a suicidal fool. Revealing your bloodline limit while the citizens of your home are persecuting your name. Yagura shook his head disapprovingly, then his features moved into a thoughtful expression, his eyes fixed on the dome above their heads for a long time until he finally blinked and turned his attention back. But perhaps we could also use this to our advantage, to finally stop this madness. Megumi forced down her fear and finally glanced up to her leader with a confused expression on her fine features. However, the Mizukage didn't bother to clear her confusion. He just continued his musing. I was finally able to pass the graduation exam thanks to Momochi Zabuza. It came with great cost, but hundreds of children will be able to live in the future thanks to his act. If I play the cards right, maybe the people of Mist will also look differently at those who held a bloodline limit. But I will need your help, Yuki Megumi. You have to follow my orders. Yagura finally looked at his young soldier with a questioning expression, waiting for the small girl to answer. The chunin chewed on her lower lip, but in the end nodded. Perfect. I will put you into Zabuza's care from now on. You have to become strong, and quickly. You have to know every aspect of your bloodline as soon as possible. But my family will be under my personal protection. No one will dare to lay even a finger on them. Yagura interrupted. The girl eyed the leader for a long silent minute until she made a low bow. Thank you, Mizukage-sama. Chapter 23. Precious Moments. Naruto silently watched the silhouettes of the delegations together with his father in the shadows of the giant gate, until their forms disappeared in the distance. The blonde time traveler let out a relieved sigh and a satisfied smile spread across his face in the next moment. A warm breeze ruffled his golden locks in a playful manner, tugging but also stroking his crown. A moan kicked him out from his small world. He glanced towards his stretching leader, and his smile widened. It went better than any of us would have thought, Minato stated, waiting for his shoulder to pop back into its place. When it did so, another satisfied moan rushed out from his soft lips. The young leader rolled his head once more before he turned toward his grinning relative. Yagura is really interested in the alliance. Anoki stopped sulking and accepted the new trading route, and even the rakeage didn't close up against it. Minato made a wondering face. Well, at least I hope, based on his I'll think about it statement. I guess it is a good start. Naruto nodded in agreement, and turned around to head inside the heart of the city. His slow steps were shadowed by his father. A crowd started to gather on the streets of Konoha for the upcoming festival. The last rays of the burning sun painted long shadows along their path. Lampions lit up all over the streets, painting everything with their soft yellowish light, replacing the slowly disappearing sunlight. A group of children passed them, playing tag and avoided knocking their respected leader to the ground only by mere centimeters. They casually strolled in the crowd, neither of them speaking a word. Naruto watched the people of his beloved village as they were enjoying the festival. Children tug on their parents' clothes for some sweets, or play games for silly and useless prizes under the proud eyes of their parents and friends. His lips almost instantly turned up in a small smile, but only for a second, before it was gone as he spotted something from the edge of his vision. Something familiar. Something which sent a shiver down his spine, and the feeling was soon followed by a droplet of cold sweat. Minato walked with his hands held behind his back, the same soft smile fixed on his lips. The leader suddenly blinked when the warm feeling disappeared from his side and he realized that he had lost his brother. The Hokage blinked once more and turned around only to realize that his brother had fallen behind a few steps, his azure pools fixed on something in a shop, standing unblinking. A frown crawled up on Minato's face when he stepped next to his frozen relative, and traced back his sight to see an orange mask plastered on the wall. Only one eye glared back at them. Even without a mouth, Minato couldn't shake off the feeling that the mask was mockingly grinning at him. The spiraling pattern was motionless, however after some time Minato had to blink to stop the sensation that indeed, it was moving, slowly whirling around its center viciously. The leader shook his head and slowly tapped his brother's shoulder, making him flinch and blink back to reality with a confused expression on his face. This is familiar. Minato started slowly, watching every emotion on his brother's face. You drew something like this in the book I had given you to test your intelligence. It's something important, isn't it? Naruto looked back at the mask, his expression betraying none of his emotions. Minato was sure that if his eyes weren't so shrouded by his blonde locks he would be able to see everything that was going on inside his relative's thick skull. All emotions would be there, bare and naked. After a short pause, Naruto shook his head and walked away from the stand without a word. Minato wasn't able to hear Naruto's soft whisper. It is an important reminder. Naruto inhaled and the tension instantly disappeared from his muscles. Minato's frown turned into a scowl as he watched his relative slowly walk away. The moment he passed by Naruto he almost lost his self-control. He was about to grab his brother's shoulder and shake him while asking, "Why don't you trust me? Why did you feed me the same crap about Orochimaru you fed the council?" But in the end none of that happened. The young leader shrugged off his disappointment and jogged after his brother. With a small slide on the soft dust of the road, Minato arrived next to his relative, gaining the attention of the nearby villagers and earning a raised eyebrow from Naruto. They walked side by side, enjoying the sight of the joyful villagers, the happy families and the laughing children. Naruto's feet unconsciously led them into the direction of a thin path, the one he trailed countless times during his childhood. Minato took notice of their way, but he said nothing. He instead chose to shadow his relatives as they followed the path leading toward the top of the Hokage monument. Naruto didn't even bother himself to look back. He knew perfectly well Minato was following him. They reached the edge of the cliff soundlessly. The two blonde shinobi gracefully hopped down to finally settle down on Minato's own stone statue. Naruto let out a long sigh and glanced up to the dark sky. He couldn't spot any clouds on the ink-black canvas. Only the stars had been sparkling on the sky unperturbedly. "Hey, Toriku?" The named blonde slowly turned toward his father, who also locked his azure gaze on the countless number of shining spots above them. 2 days ago, when you were talking about getting your hands on my hat, were you serious? You really want to be Hokage one day? Minato was lucky he couldn't see the wince of his brother, nor the shadows of guilt currently dulling his gaze as his eyes drifted toward the village at their feet. Nor could he actually know the fact that he was actually speaking to someone who had been named as the Rokudaime Hokage. A young man who had seen the very same living and pulsing village as it was reduced to nothing else than dust and debris. Twice. Even if he actually declined the position back then, Uzumaki Naruto still bore the weight and the guilt of a real Kage for letting his village fall. Gaara's soft, almost murmuring voice trailed inside his mind. "When you think your time has come, when you think you are ready to wear the hat, you can replace your 8 with your old one. Until that time, you are a shinobi of the allied forces." Naruto's hands unconsciously moved toward his 8 to trace over the fine lines of Konoha's symbol on his forehead. His fingers carefully followed the swirl in the middle, and when the trail finally ended his hand dropped inside his lap. "Konoha is my home. I held her people as close to my heart as I could. I'm clumsy, I can be an idiot sometimes, and I'm also irresponsible. I always just rush bullheaded into the battle without thinking. I'm not even sure I know what the real duties of being the Hokage are. But still, every time I see you inside the office, I'm jealous." The fourth finally averted his azure pools from the night sky to watch his brother for a long minute, before he answered. "You would be a great leader. I already told you that, and I don't want to repeat myself. You've got everything in you that you'll need to one day become a great leader. If you're still unsure of yourself, look at the Raikage. He is as hot-headed as you, rude, and also punches before he thinks. But he had his brother next to him. I've got Kushina next to me to direct me and guide me through the hindrances I have to face. When your time comes, I will be there by your side to guide you. Naruto stared back with wide and surprised eyes. He hesitantly opened then closed his lips to respond with something, but he couldn't squeeze anything out from his suddenly dry mouth. So instead of desperately trying to push out something coherent, his lips just turned up with the softest smile Minato had ever seen on his face. Real happiness rushed over his form, and somehow his chakra shifted into something which reminded Minato of the first real warm sunshine after a long and dark storm. It was sunny and full of life. Even the nature around them somehow seemed to respond. Minato curiously glanced around and noted as the flora somehow rushed to life in the first week of May. A small wildflower next to Naruto, which was strong enough to hold onto a small crack in the stone, flinched, and its until now closed buds slowly opened, revealing the soft, orange blossom. Then slowly Naruto's chakra shifted back to its original form. It was still warm as always, it was still full of life, and it was still as wild as always. The faint sound of approaching footsteps interrupted his thoughts. He glanced up to the edge of the cliff and noted the brilliantly shining crimson hair and the dim light of the stars. Kushina gracefully walked down to them, and more figures followed her silent footsteps. Kakashi trailed after her with a stoic expression on his face, while Rin slowly and carefully took each chakra-infused step on the cliff. Finally Jiraiya landed beside them with the loud thud of his wooden sandals, a wide grin on his face. Before any of them could greet each other, a loud squealing sound echoed over the village, and when it ended with a louder bang, millions of dancing sparkles filled the until now ink-black sky. The faint sound of cheering people reached their battle-hardened ear. The newcomers hastily hopped down next to the two blondes to silently watch the billions of dancing sparkles as they were shimmering down toward the village. The fireworks painted everything soft warm orange, vibrant yellow, vicious red, and hundreds of other shades. A harsh string of swearing kicked Naruto out from his reading. He was studying a large and unfortunately very boring, very long and old scroll about space-time ninjutsu he had found in Minato's private library. A weary sigh left his soft lips, and he slowly dragged himself toward the next room where his mother's voice came from. He found her next to the wall, desperately trying to remove a picture from a broken frame without tearing it. Naruto crouched next to her, carefully avoiding the shards of the broken glass. What happened? It just fell from the wall. I didn't even touch it. Experienced and lean fingers finally slowly pulled out the picture without damaging it. Kushina's green eyes examined the picture with a sentimental glint in her eyes, her soft lips turned up in a warm smile. Naruto curiously peeked at the picture. It was heartbreakingly familiar. The grinning Minato in the middle, surrounded by his genin team. The smiling Rin and the two sulking boys, currently glaring daggers at each other. It was nostalgic and almost the perfect match to his own team picture. The one which was sealed inside his scroll for a long time. His gaze traveled toward the sulking Uchiha, and he soon found himself trying to pair the small boy in the picture with the grown, possessed, and insane man of his own time. They are reminding you of someone, aren't they? Naruto flung his head toward his mother's soft voice, before he carefully averted his gaze back to the picture. Kushina's soft smile never left her soft features. You can trust me, you know. Naruto slowly nodded, his eyes still carefully avoiding Kushina's own. The kunoichi watched him, and in the next second Naruto found himself in her sweet embrace. He could feel her warmth wrapping around him like a soft blanket, and he unconsciously leaned into the contact. He didn't answer for a long minute, just enjoying the warm feeling around him. Eagerly swallowing up all the feelings he couldn't have during his childhood. He couldn't even feel or hear as his lips moved and the words slipped out from his mouth uncontrolled. They are like my old team. Naruto winced when Kurama's furious snort echoed inside his mindscape. What the hell are you doing, you moron? But Naruto didn't answer. Instead he tried to burrow himself into the feeling of a soft blanket Kushina offered to him with her arms. What happened to them? Kushina asked curiously, but she didn't miss as Naruto bit down on his lower lip and averted his gaze once again. His mother let out a soft breath and squeezed him a little bit more. I see. Kushina murmured into his ears. I know you've had a harsh past. But if you ever want to talk about it with someone, I'll wait for you. Naruto shook off his frozen state, and curiously glanced up at his mother, not really sure what she was referring to. We don't have many precious people. Losing them is the deepest pain someone like us could bear. The blonde furrowed his brow in confusion, but by the next sentence his eyes instantly widened. After all, only we can fully understand each other's pain. Naruto hesitantly opened his mouth, then closed it, while Kushina just giggled at his attempt to squeeze out something coherent. Naruto found himself unable to speak for the second time in a week. The only thing he could do was stare and gape like a fish. Jinchuriki can sometimes feel each other. Didn't you know it? I wasn't aware what the nudging feeling I got every time we were together was, but when you were fighting in the arena I heard you yelling at the small girl. To not give up. To stay strong. To not let the bijou take control over her body. And Kushina slowly brushed a small tuft of blonde hair out from his forehead which escaped under his 8. And Minato told me a lot of things. That you know a lot about bijou and that you could hear the one-tailed in Suna. That you recognize the bijou in Fu. And you also know the name of the 8 tails. You know things that only I should know. It wasn't hard to put one and one together. At least not for another. Naruto hesitantly started. I don't know how to react. You don't have to say anything. Does Minato know about it? Kushina slowly removed her arms around him and slowly led him away from the shining shards and settled him down on the bed to sit next to him. Azure eyes scanned Emerald One's warily. Do you want him to know about it? Naruto hesitated to answer. But in the end, he shook his head. Then this will be our little secret. Thank you. It was that moment when Naruto felt another presence step into the house. He felt the small wave that rushed through the uncountable amount of security seals as the familiar man passed the doorstep. What are you two doing? Half a minute later Minato's messy blonde head peeked into the room, ruining the precious moment in an instant. Kushina slowly got up from the bed to place a small kiss on his cheek. Just chatting. About what? The Hokage asked curiously, hopping down next to his brother. The redhead glanced toward the pleading eyes of Naruto and let out a small sigh. There was no way she could avert Minato's questions now. Once he found something interesting, there was no way to avert his mind from the topic. The only way was if he received something more interesting to think about. Kushina made one last glance toward the nervously fidgeting young blonde boy before she made her decision. Guess it is actually time to tell you something. Naruto's eyes grew wider and wider, but after Kushina's reassuring glance he finally settled down. However, his previous restless movements were mimicked by none other than Kushina as she nervously started to fidget, shifting her weight from leg to leg, restlessly chewing on her lower lip, while she gathered her thoughts on how to actually tell them. Then in the next second a wide grin spread across her face as, instead of beating around the bush, she just blurted out everything with one breath. I'm going to be a mother, Databane. Minato's eyes widened, his mouth had fallen while Naruto's mouth moved into the widest grin he could manage without threatening his face to split in two. He made a side glance to his father next to him, noting the paler and paler features of the fearless Hokage. Minato stared into the empty space in front of him, while his mouth opened and closed continuously, mimicking a fish on dry land. Both of his companions watched him warily as his face slowly got a slight blue tint as he simply forgot how to breathe. Naruto soon started to fear that his father would simply faint next to him. But thankfully the village leader slowly regained some color in his face, and some of his composure, as he gathered himself at a snail's pace. His mouth opened once again and finally found some words to express his thoughts. However, he failed pitifully. But how then when no coherent words came out from his mouth he just gave up. His mouth closed and a goofy smile spread across his face. It was his brother's laughter which kicked him out from his utter ecstasy, and his hard hand which was now tapping his back continuously. How? You really want to ask Jiraiya to tell you the story of where babies come from? A disgusted grimace spread across Kushina's face, but she still made a small hesitant step toward her fiancé, who just sat there silently. Minato? She asked hesitantly. But when the goofy smile spread across his face for the second time, she just mimicked it. I will be a father. And I'm going to be a mother. I will be a father. Then in the next second both of them rushed toward each other to meet in the middle of the room in a sweet embrace. Their hands desperately tried to hug each other as much as possible as they seemed to melt into each other's body to be even closer. Even Naruto could feel the overwhelming love they were currently emitting toward each other. Our time traveler watched with a soft smile on his face as Kushina buried herself even deeper into Minato's chest. He could feel as even the almighty demon fox inside the remains of his seal smiled. He noticed a small soft movement from the corner of his eyes, and it kicked him out from his musing. He stared at Minato's gently inviting hand. He slowly raised from the bed, not actually sure that he should disturb their moment. He hesitantly stepped further and further, and when he was just an arm's distance, Minato grabbed him and pulled him into the embrace to join them in one of the happiest moments of their lives. They stood like that for long seconds, maybe minutes. But for Naruto, it felt like an eternity. And he hoped that it would never end. He eagerly tried to carve this sweet feeling into the deepest parts of his mind so he could remember this moment forever. A lonely tear slowly slid down his face, painting a thin wet line all the way until it reached his chin. It hesitantly stopped for a second before it dropped down to land on Kushina's arms around him. "You will be the best parents a kid could ever wish for," Naruto softly murmured, and he immediately felt as Minato's arms squeezed him a little more, while Kushina's soft voice traveled toward him in a shooting way. "And you will be the best uncle Naruto could wish for." Naruto restrained a flinch and closed his eyes for a second. Could he really do this? Could he really drop his real name for the sake of an unborn child? Jealousy raised inside him almost instantly. It glared at him with his glowing green eyes like a monster under a child's bed in the night. This kid, he will get everything he couldn't get in his childhood. This child will have parents. He will have a warm home to return to after school. There will be people to greet him as soon as he steps inside. What did he receive? Pointed glares. A cold and empty apartment. He never had anyone to greet him when he returned after a mission. But suddenly the jealousy was gone as fast as it came. What was he thinking? This boy was him. He slowly shook his head to ease away the last bit of his previous thoughts. A small smile spread across his face, while his eyes sparkled with determination. Yes. He will do everything to make this boy happy. He will do everything to see this Naruto smile carefree, and not because he is wearing a mask of happiness. He will be there, holding his small hand when he takes his first steps. He will be there to give him a shoulder when he needs it. He will be there when Sasuke beats him in one of the academy spars, and he will be there in the front row when he graduates from the academy. He will be there for him as the best uncle or as the best brother a child could wish for. It doesn't matter how, but he will be there for him. Naruto wasn't aware that during these dark and jealous thoughts, all of Kurama's attention was glued on a spot in his mindscape. Naruto wasn't aware that his companion had been intensively watching with a deep frown on his face as a foggy replica of the loud-mouthed blonde slowly materialized inside the remains of the seal. The transparent figure slowly became solid, only the edge of his form remained blurry. Kurama narrowed his eyes even more, his muscles tensing as the edge of Naruto's once pure white eyes slowly became gray. Nor was the blonde teen aware that as his jealousy slowly grew, so did the gray slowly overwhelm the whiteness of his eyes, and the edges were slowly becoming ink black as it moved further and further until it almost touched the edge of his once azure blue pools, which were now also slowly morphing into a crimson tint. The air around him slowly became colder, and Naruto's soft breath soon became visible. Naruto's form suddenly flinched. Kurama finally released his eyes from Naruto's projection for the first time to glance up toward the until now slowly darkening mindscape. There, a small and warm beam stabbed through the dark clouds above their heads. The beam slowly started to grow until the place was once again sunny and warm. Naruto's until now visible breaths faded away as the temperature also rose. Kurama returned his crimson eyes to the transparent boy in front of him. His irises were once again the sparkling blue, shining with the familiar mirth, while the darkness from his scara retreated and disappeared. Kurama let out a relieved sigh and allowed his muscles to relax. The deep frown was once again on his furry face as he eyed his companion. The fox slowly shook his head to ease away his growing worry. Maybe Itachi was right. I shouldn't have forced him to handle this alone. Kurama softly murmured while he retreated behind one of the giant dasae trees, after one last glance at the slowly disappearing mirage. Naruto's muscles tensed until the breaking point. He took one more step, careful not to make any noise. His eyes twitched when, despite how his own movements were flawless, the ancient old floor faintly squeaked under his weight. It wasn't actually loud, it was not even louder than a soft breath, but it was still enough for Naruto to pause. One more step toward his destination and the mission will be accomplished. A minute later, he finally reached his peacefully sleeping target. He ran his Asa pulls over the smooth face once more, before he reached down and grabbed the cold handle of his ninja tool from his weapon pouch. His other hand soundlessly opened a small vial and dipped the nib into the ink-black liquid. Naruto let out a long breath, careful to not disturb his victim's sleep. He raised his now armed hand and tensed his muscles, slowly calculating where he would attack first. When he found the perfect spot, a vicious grin spread across his face. Then he struck. A long, thin line appeared on his victim's face after each of the perfect movements. When Naruto finally finished the last stroke, the soft brush and the sealing ink returned to his weapon pouch. Minato was still sleeping and softly snoring, while his head rested on his folded arms, slightly dipped to the side in the middle of the Hokage's office. A wide grin spread across Naruto's face as he examined the perfection of his handiwork. His father was now snoring with 3 whisker marks on each of his cheeks. Naruto turned his head toward the puzzled and nervously fidgeting Anbu in the darkness of the corner, and sent them a beaming smile. Then he slowly raised his index finger toward his mouth, indicating complete silence from his audience. However, the professionals weren't as professional as he thought, as the youngest Anbu couldn't keep up his calm facade. A muffled snicker escaped behind his squeezed lips, disturbing the complete silence of the office in an instant. Naruto just rolled his eyes and sent an annoyed glare toward the lurking green-horned soldier, and shook his head in disapproval. His eyes turned toward his father, who slowly blinked, straightened himself, and stretched the aching muscles of his back. Minato let out a loud yawn and rubbed his eyes, before he turned toward his brother. "What are you doing here, Taraku?" Naruto sent a wide grin in response and shrugged. "Nothing. Just fooling around. I'm bored to death. We still have a lot of time before night hits." One of the Anbu cleared his throat, but after one warning glare from his brother, the Hokage's private soldier stilled. In the end, the Anbu shrugged. No harm was done actually, and they also deserved some fun. Minato suspiciously narrowed his eyes after he ran his azure pulls over the lurking shinobi. Naruto just stood in the middle of the office while trying to look as innocent as he could. "If you are thinking of pulling a prank on me, you should get it out of your head right now." "Nah, you got up too early." But the temptation was strong. Naruto answered with the most innocent eyes he could pull. However, this unnerved the Hokage even more. An innocent-looking Toraku just screams for trouble. A minute later, Toraku was gone and Minato started sweeping through his office for any hidden taps. But he had found no paint bucket above the door, nor above the window. So after wasting half an hour exploring the place for anything suspicious, he just settled down behind his desk. Visitors came and went for a long hour. Chunin and Jounin left after they received their newest mission. However, all of them gave him an odd look before they left. At the end of the day, Minato felt himself squeezed dry. He was paranoid for the last hour, seeing traps and pranks in every corner. And the behavior of every man and woman who stepped inside his office just raised his paranoia. Thankfully, the streets were almost empty until the time he stepped out from the office. He thought for a moment to just use his seals and teleport to his house, but the sweet scent of the night was inviting. So he decided to slowly walk home to enjoy the early May weather. Before he could make any further steps, one of his Anbu appeared next to him, her head carefully bowed. "Hokage-sama. Before you go any further, I wish to tell you something." Minato furrowed his brow and nodded toward the shinobi, who instead of answering, warily handed over a small mirror. Minato made a confused expression, glancing from the mirror toward the woman in the mask for a hesitant minute. He felt his cheeks slowly turn bright red as somewhere deep in his mind he realized that he was actually pranked by none other than his brother. The Hokage slowly opened the small pocket mirror and glanced toward his reflection. He dimly noted the 3 identical whisker marks on each of his cheeks. He slowly closed the pocket mirror, and the Anbu immediately retreated into the shadows, fearing that her leader would take out some of his frustration on her. But she had to admit, it was fun. It was utterly wrong, and shameful for them to let the Hokage be pranked, but still. However, to her surprise, instead of bursting out in anger, Namikaze Minato started to laugh. There was nothing that could ruin his mood. Tomorrow will be a special day after all. Tomorrow, he will officially be a married man. But before that happens, he has to face a bunch of excited males. And he feared what his perverted sensei had in store for him. Hopefully Kushina won't castrate him for any of it. Muffled laughs and loud yells could be heard behind a thick wooden door. A rusty, metal sign hung lazily above it, shouting away the name of the place. The Rusty Shuriken was a popular place for shinobi to rest after a long mission or to just come along and pour down some sake to oil their sore throats. The place was always crowded, however this time there were only a bunch of males sitting around a table in the middle of the bar. The board slumped under the massive amount of sturdy empty cups and bottles the small bunch had already inhaled down their throats. Tui and Biu had been lurking under the shadows of the corners, but their always stoic faces were now curled up in a small smile under the ice-cold surface of the porcelain mask. Jiraiya raised from his chair and cleared his throat, while raising his cup of sake high into the air. His cheeks were already much redder than usual and his words slurred by the amount of alcohol he already poured down his throat. To the end of freedom of our fearless blonde Hokage. Hopefully you'll enjoy this sweet captivity for a long, long time. And Jiraiya emptied his cup in one swig, and slumped down into his chair with a goofy, but altogether satisfied smile on his face. A soft smile spread across the named blonde leader's flushed face, and Minato carefully sipped from his own glass. Even if he had been careful to not drink as much as his teacher, he could already feel the slight effects of the alcohol. His words faltered from time to time, and an invisible power also started to tug his head from the side, not in an irritating way, but a pleasant one. The widely grinning sage suddenly found a new target for entertainment. Jiraiya lumberly stood up to sway to the other end of the table, and dropped himself between Naruto and Kakashi. You seem too normal. Are you drinking correctly? You know, it's a day when everything is allowed. Hey! Kakashi is still underaged. He can't drink. Jiraiya waved a hand to the displeased Minato and continued with the same grin plastered on his features, his face only centimeters from Naruto. The blonde's face scrunched up in a displeased expression as the Toad Summoner's sour breath hit him harder than an actual kick. However, he didn't have time to voice it, as Jiraiya flung an arm around the blonde's shoulder. I know, extreme healing and all, but I bet I can win a drinking competition against any of you. The blonde lazily raised his brow and a smug smile spread across his face. You want a drinking competition? You picked the wrong guy, you know. I can drink sake all day and I won't even sway. Naruto sent a cheeky smirk. Wanna bet? The smug smile on Naruto's face widened into a foxy and cunning grin. The next second Naruto blinked, he found a cup of sake in his hand and Jiraiya already raised his own. I don't think that is a good idea. Minato shook his head in his displeasure, eyeing his own cup of sake with an askance look on his fine features. Kushina is going to skin me for this. Then the deal is up. Jiraiya hopped to his feet and the competition started. The foxy grin never left Naruto's face, however he wasn't aware that his never-missing fluffy companion had the same cunning expression on his own furry face. I'm going to enjoy this so much. Let's see how you'll handle this by yourself. An hour later, Minato's voice stumbled from time to time as his tongue couldn't really follow his attempts at speech. Jiraiya carefully pushed a thick notebook into Kakashi's hands with a proud expression, and with a loud "It's finished!" And somehow the teen disappeared to the back of the bar after he had finished reading the first page. The blonde time traveler let out a barking laugh as soon as he spotted the flaming red skin on his soon-to-be sensei's ears. Naruto felt funny. He was carefree, his head slightly swaying more and more with each passing minute, and with each cup of sake, the dam that had been restraining his actions was becoming weaker and weaker. His own voice faltered from time to time, and the always fine and clear line between reality and the now dreamlike world slowly started to smudge for Naruto. The world suddenly dangerously tilted and he even grasped hard the edge of the thick wooden table. Naruto soundlessly slipped down from his chair, to land with a loud thud on the hard floor. He laid there in an awkward position, too weary to even try to untie his rumpled limbs. But somehow his embarrassing position wasn't bothering him at all, since the cold floor felt really good against his temple. Warm hands slipped under his armpits to carefully lift him. However, when he finally got the power to station his limbs under him, Jiraiya's arms weren't there to give him any more support. So he almost slumped once more. Though thankfully he didn't hit the ground this time. His father caught him just in time. Come on. I think you've drunk enough. You are mean. Just 5 more minutes. Come, the bed is more comfortable. Stupid Kakashi-sensei. Minato's lips curved up into a wide grin. Sensei, huh? An unrecognizable sound escaped from Naruto's soft lips, but it still sounded like a cheeky retort. Minato shook his head and quickly left before Jiraiya could protest or any more idiotic ideas could pop into his head, dragging his half-conscious relative toward their house. He had no doubt that he would mess up the whole house if he used his Hiraishin with him in this state. It was a long way home, with his brother's continuous incoherent mumbling. A lurking Anbu hopped down from the roof when he spotted his leader slightly swaying home with his brother on his back. Hokage-sama. Ero-sanin, I don't want a train. Naruto mumbled softly into Minato's neck and snorted before his eyelids were closed again and started to loudly snore. Minato shot his soldier with a beaming smile. His cheeks were still flushed from the amount of alcohol he tucked down his throat, then he stumbled to the side. Only the wall of the building next to him kept him from falling face down with his brother on his back. After 10 more minutes, desperately trying to get into the house, he finally laid down his snoring brother to his bed. He was about to leave the room when his brother started to fidget under his blanket. "No, I'm glad you're here. And I love you guys so much." "I'm glad you're here too. And I know that already, you idiot." Minato answered softly, however his brother was already asleep. Again. "I hate you," Naruto growled, and grimaced at his image in the mirror inside the bathroom, while he was desperately trying to force his mess of sun-kissed hair into a decent form. His temples were throbbing and his stomach was still whirling with the vehemence of his own name. His throat was drier than the deserts of Suna, while his white eyeballs were red all over. Kurama was obviously on strike and not letting even a droplet of his chakra into Naruto's system to wash out his terrible hangover. "Why did you do this to me?" "For fun, what else?" Kurama yawned and fidgeted to get a better place to lay down for a nap. However, his fury appeared inside his mindscape, with hands on his hips and leaning inside Kurama's private space, which was quite the feat, doing this to a giant demon fox. "Like you do anything without reason." Azure Eyes sent another set of imaginary daggers through Kurama's orbs, but Naruto's attempt to look threatening miserably failed as his headache returned with a force he could feel even in his mindscape. His face scrunched up in pain and a pitiful groan escaped from his lips as he grabbed his temple to try and shoot away his throbbing headache. "Pretty please. I'll do whatever you want, but I can't live through this day like this." Kurama eyed his company with a raised eyebrow for a never-ending second before he shrugged. "Guess I can take care of that. You would be a pain in the ass if you started whining like a 5-year-old girl." The fox wanted to tease him more, but another blonde crow sneaked a peek inside the slightly open bathroom door and Naruto immediately retreated back to reality. With one last sigh, Kurama let down the dam and healing chakra started to flow slowly inside the blonde's chakra coils. Not enough to be detected, but it was still enough to shake back his jailer into a decent form. "Are you ready? It's time to go." Naruto let out a pleased sigh as soon as his headache retreated and nodded. In the next blink, they were gone with the speed of the Hiraishin, to reappear at the other side of the village for a very special ceremony. Minato's long black haori ruffled in the soft breeze, his azure eyes peered into emerald ones. His always messy blonde hair freely danced in the soft wind. He left his 8 and his Hokage hat to rest in the office. He was just an ordinary man in this moment, and not the feared village leader. And it was a moment he would remember for the rest of his life. He gently reached for Kushina's hand and squeezed it a little. She looked beautiful. Not even Kushina's slightly round tummy ruined her perfection, it just made her more beautiful than ever. Her vibrant red hair freely flowed over the pure white kimono, a single small white kanzashi restraining her hair. The jewelry tinkled from time to time as she moved her face to look over the gathered people. It was their wedding day, and not even the weather seemed to interfere in it. If Mother Nature dared to ruin it, she'd have to face Kushina's wrath. Even if the hot-blooded kunoichi couldn't do anything against Mother Nature, there was a bet going on in the lines of the attendees that she would at least try to go against her if she sent a rainstorm on this precious day. The ceremony was short and simple, nothing fancy. What actually mattered was the happiness on their faces, brightening them up from head to toe as the newest official couple of Konoha were stealing quick glances and kisses every time they got the opportunity for it. Naruto watched Jiraiya form the corner of his eyes as he was staring at the two lovebirds. His hands had been clinging around the same cup of sake for the last half hour. His eyes were hazy and foggy like he saw something or someone else instead of Minato and Kushina for a long time. Then his vision cleared again and locked on the laughing happy pair. The blonde couldn't help himself. He let out a small chuckle when a small tear slid down the Toad Summoner's face. His godfather grunted in his annoyance, and immediately wiped away the small droplet before it could leave his chin. "Shut up, Gaki. You're crying too," Jiraiya mumbled, but his face moved into a soft smile as he watched as his student finally slowly led away his wife to get some privacy. Naruto hesitantly raised his hand to wipe away the sweat tears of happiness from his face. But he couldn't. They just continued to flow, and he eventually gave up the fight against them. So he just let them flow freely while he laughed. He laughed as real happiness flushed him from head to toe. Naruto softly hummed the rhythm he still remembered from the wedding. The blonde sat under a giant tree, his back firmly resting against his temporary teacher, enjoying the first warm beams of the early summer, which promised a real hot wave in weeks. Jiraiya turned a page in his notes, his experienced fingers already scribbling down the fine and precise kanji. Naruto suddenly stopped humming. "You should speak to her." Jiraiya didn't stop writing and raised an eyebrow. "To whom?" "To the girl you were thinking about during the wedding." Jiraiya let out a snort and shook his head. "Let me say something to you, Gaki. My love life is private. And it's platonic. There is no way she would." Jiraiya suddenly stopped and bit down on his lips, not aware of Naruto's searching blue eyes behind him. "You should tell her, or you may never have a chance. People don't live forever." "Why? You didn't get the chance to declare your love to your own woman or something?" Jiraiya could feel the boy's muscles tense in his back. Then he could feel as his muscles slowly relaxed and the boy leaned a little more backward, maybe to seek some comfort or encouragement. "No. It was my sure show," Naruto hesitantly stated. And somehow, this time Kurama only narrowed his eyes inside his mindscape. Jiraiya moved his eyes to the side, to at least catch a glimpse of the teen, eagerly waiting for the blonde to continue. But after a long wait, he didn't continue, and soon the Toad Sage started to lose hope that he would actually know something more from his past. So the Toad Summoner let out a long sigh before he opened his mouth. "I see. Well, I won't be dying anytime soon, so I guess I've got a lot of time." Naruto opened his mouth to answer, but he immediately closed it. He just stared at him, silently waiting for Jiraiya's next step. And surprisingly, Kurama was still silent inside him. There was no shouting, no swearing, nothing at all. The ancient old giant demon fox silently observed his jailer's every move. Some weight disappeared from his shoulder as soon as the words slipped from his lips. He felt relieved when Jiraiya didn't start to dig deeper, and he was thankful for it. Especially since he knew that the old sage could be like a small child when something interesting happened, almost jumping up and down in excitement. But the Toad Summoner just stayed in silence, enjoying the warm sun and the dancing shadows of the leaves as they were painting abstract forms on them. If Minato and Kushina weren't there next to him, Naruto would have jumped up and down in excitement. They casually strolled toward their destination on the streets of Konoha. They had been heading to the Uchiha compound. A wide grin had been plastered on Naruto's face ever since Minato told them that the whole Namake's family had been invited for dinner. Naruto casually waved his greeting to the guards at the thick wooden gates of the compound, and the stunned shinobi hesitantly mimicked the hail with a small nod toward the blonde and with a low bow to Minato. A merchandise cart left by their side, and it made Naruto send a beaming smile towards the civilian. The clan had been slowly opening up toward the village. He never thought it would be successful, but it was. The walls were still around the compound. You can't just bulldoze down decades of tradition. But at least the gates weren't closed anymore. Even the people were more open toward the others. First the merchants came to sell their goods, and then with small steps, more and more citizens of Konoha ventured to take a look around the place. Children started to create bonds with other clans as they were able to move more freely within the field of the clan and with the children. The families also started to seek for other people's company other than the clan members. It will be a long way until he will be able to spot mixed lovebirds, but he could feel that the time was not as far off as he first imagined. They casually walked on the wide and tidy streets until they reached a small wooden fence. But it wasn't closed, as Naruto could remember during his childhood, especially when he once or twice sneaked inside the compound. It was wide open, so this time he could see the tidy garden at the other side of the fence. Naruto hesitantly stepped over the doorstep only to find himself facing a small child. He unconsciously made a gulp as he immediately recognized the small boy in front of him. The boy made a deep bow. Hokage-sama, Uzumaki-sama. My parents are waiting for you inside the house. Naruto winced at the formal tone of the small child, but his concern was shoved to the side when the obsidian orbs finally turned toward him. Eyes far too intelligent for a 5-year-old child observed him carefully. Kushina made a curious glance to her frozen brother-in-law and gently pushed him 8 km further. Come on, he's just a child. He won't bite off your head. Naruto made a sour grimace, but after a second it was replaced with a wide, toothy grin. He held out a hand toward the child. Hi. My name is Namikaze Toriku. Glad to meet you. The child curiously observed the offered hand for a long moment, then he slowly grabbed it to shake it. Uchiha Itachi. Glad to meet you, Namikaze-sama. Naruto scrunched his nose in displeasure and leaned closer to the child. Can I ask you a favor? Itachi raised an eyebrow and nodded. Stop calling me Namikaze-sama. It makes me feel old. I'm Toriku. So call me that, please. Just Toriku. Itachi nodded again. Toriku-san, but he couldn't finish it when Naruto grunted. Toriku-san, Itachi slowly amended. Obsidian eyes bored into sunny blue ones, until a smile spread across Itachi's face, making the 2 lines under his eyes a little deeper. My parents are inside. Itachi tugged the hand he was still holding, and the 5-year-old child simply led him further into the house like that. Kushina silently watched from the background as Itachi led away her relative. She let out a disappointed sigh. I wish that I'll be able to handle kids as good as him. But I'm still happy to see Itachi-kun smile. The last time I saw him, Kushina slowly shook her head. He's seen too much for a child to see. Minato reached out and gently grabbed her hand. You will be a great mother. Come. Let's not make Fugaku and Mikoto wait. Kushina sent back a beaming smile, and they silently strolled after Itachi and the still grinning Naruto, watching as the 2 boys chatted. One too old for his age, and one too childish for his own. Naruto was the first one to step into the traditional Japanese house. Itachi led him further into the dining room where the clan head was waiting. Fugaku's dark eyes observed him, a little longer than was actually well-mannered, before he finally greeted the teen. Toriku-kun. I don't think you've ever met my wife before. Naruto turned his head toward the door where a lean, dark-haired woman stepped further into the dining room. Naruto restrained the urge to immediately look toward her obviously round tummy. Mikoto stepped closer with a soft smile on her face, and after the introductions and finally Minato and Kushina also arrived, Naruto couldn't endure the urge. He glanced down at Mikoto's round tummy and an unconscious smile spread across his face. However, that moment didn't last too long. Kushina rushed next to her and his mother immediately started talking and asking a long chain of questions. Naruto slowly shook his head and settled down next to his grinning father at the table. Minato sent one last smirk toward the kitchen where he could still hear Kushina's muffled voice. Leave them alone. I have a feeling that Mikoto won't be free for some time. And he was right. Kushina released Mikoto after 15 minutes had passed, and only because the woman protested that she had to prepare the lunch. However, Kushina was more than eager to help her out while still shooting random questions at her about pregnancy while they were busy taking in the plates filled with delicious-looking food. Thankfully, when Kushina finally received answers for all of her questions, the table was made so Mikoto could finally take a seat next to her husband with bright red cheeks. Surely Kushina embarrassed her to death with all of her blunt and shameless questions about her pregnancy. Minato just softly smiled at the scene. However, Mikoto was really far from being Kushina's best friend or altogether far from even calling her a friend. But Kushina in some ways was the same as his brother, she also had the ability to influence people around her. Even if only on a much smaller level, the ability was still there. 15 minutes ago Mikoto acted like a stranger around the redhead, but after she was under her charm, the distance between them slowly shrunk until there was only a thin, almost invisible line between them. The dinner, thankfully, went in a normal way. Well, at least normal in the norms of Minato. Living together with the red-hot-blooded habanero and his brother was actually very far from normal. 2 lively, hot-tempered people under one roof were just screaming for trouble, but also for fun. Naruto stretched his arms and let out a loud yawn, much to Fugaku's displeasure. The obsidian eyes flashed for a second and the clan head scrunched up his nose when the blonde boy scratched his round tummy. Mikoto-san, that was just fantastic. The woman hid her satisfied smile with one of her graceful hands, but the small blush on her cheeks still said 1,000 words. Naruto soon became restless as his hands and mouth weren't occupied anymore. The teen first started to fidget restlessly in the peaceful silence while Mikoto disappeared with the dishes, Kushina on her heels. Minato enjoyed the silence even as he was aware of his brother's continuous fidgeting. He leisurely cupped his steaming tea and only drank small sips from the sour liquid. The house was strangely quiet. Only the fauna made their appearance, known as a lonely cicada found its place on the wooden sill under the open window. It was an early bloomer, most likely the first of its kind, but it still shouted out to the whole world that summer is coming. The Hokage and his brother silently listened together with Fugaku and Itachi as the summer's first prophet started to sing its sonata. However, the sweet sonata was soon disturbed by Toriku. "Hey Itachi-kun. Do you think you could show me around? I've never been here before." A sarcastic snort echoed inside his mindscape. "Yeah. And I'm a cute little kit. You want a hug or something?" Kurama scrunched up his nose in displeasure. "No way in hell I'll let you hug me. A shame. You must be all soft and fluffy." "Toriku-san, are you a shinobi?" Itachi's question came from thin air, immediately kicking out Naruto from his starting bickering with Kurama. The blonde blinked and scratched the back of his head. "Well, yeah? And I'm a strong one." That was the understatement of the year, brat. Naruto ignored the fox and instead glanced down at the curiously shining black eyes with a smirk on his face. "Hey Itachi-kun, do you want to play ninja?" A smile spread across Minato's face, while Fugaku slowly raised an eyebrow in a questioning manner. Midnight black eyes observed the grinning teen at the other side of the table, trying to figure out what was happening inside that thick head. However, he couldn't find any answer. "So? You wanna play?" Naruto queried a questioning eyebrow. The small child reconsidered it for a second, before he slowly nodded. The duo departed from the room without any further comments, or even a glance backwards. However, they were followed by a pair of black eyes. Fugaku slowly shook his head and glanced toward the grinning Hokage. Why would a grown-up ninja want to play ninja with a child? Minato shrugged and sipped from his tea. However, in the next moment his grin was nowhere to be seen. His face became serious, but his eyes still sparkled with curiosity. "So how is our little project doing?" Minato asked, his hands still cupped around a steaming mug of tea, watching as the steam slowly contorted into abstract form in the motionless air. Fugaku glanced back immediately, his form straightened in his seat. "I have to say, it went better than I first thought. The elders are pleased with the new advisory body and the murmurs about the coup are at ease. They weren't too pleased with the new entries in the police force, but seeing the positive progress they came to terms with it." "How many new recruits joined your side?" 10, Fugaku answered, casually sipping from his seat. 5 are from the other clans. I even got a Yamanaka. He's quite helpful during interrogations." "That's good." Minato smiled as he looked inside his mug. "And I also got a greenhorn civilian now, thanks to you." Fugaku made a sour grimace and refilled his empty mug. "A civilian?" Minato raised an eyebrow and gestured towards the clan head, requesting a fill-up. "I gave him some administration duties. He will be okay. He was jumpy during the first week, but he's adapting quite quickly." Minato raised an eyebrow and glanced towards the open window where Naruto's soft laugh twisted inside. However, his attention was glued on another slowly approaching presence. They didn't have to wait for long as a familiar mop of untidy black hair stuck his head inside the room. "Fugaku-sama, I dash." There was a pause before the newcomer collected himself. "Hokage-sama, I'm sorry. I didn't know you had guests." "Itachi is outside." Fugaku gestured towards the back entrance. The teen made a bow to each man and quickly retreated from the piercing azure blue eyes and the questioning frown on Minato's face. "He and my son have a long history together." Fugaku answered the unasked question. Shursui was his first babysitter when he was a toddler, and now he's tutoring Itachi almost every second night. Itachi is more grown up than you would think. Minato didn't answer, he just made one hesitant nod, before they continued with their chat. Naruto unconsciously tensed as a new presence stepped inside the backyard. The soft footsteps made no noise for a normal shinobi, but the blonde could still hear crystal clear, the soft noise of the soul as it connected with the soft dust, and he could also hear as restrained shinobi clothes rustled slightly by each and every movement the ninja made. He glanced over his shoulder to sneak a peek at the newcomer, who suddenly stopped in his pace as he also spotted the blonde head next to Itachi, who was busy burying his shuriken into a training buddy. "Hey, did you see that?" Naruto glanced down at the smiling boy and patted his head when he noticed the shuriken in the middle of the bull's eye. "That was a nice throw, Itachi-kun." The newcomer started with a soft smile on his face, and the small child immediately lit up and ran towards the man. "Shursui-sensei." Naruto's eyes widened, while the boy slowly approached the frozen blonde. "Shursui? This boy is Uchiha Shursui? I thought he was supposed to be about Itachi's age." The young teen made a polite bow as soon as they reached him. "I don't think we've met before. My name is Uchiha Shursui." Naruto hesitantly made a bow. "Namikaze Toriku." The two boys stared at each other, or most likely Naruto just stared and Shursui furrowed his brow under the weight of the azure eyes, while the young Itachi slowly started to fidget from foot to foot under the sudden tension in the air. However, it was washed away in the next blink as a wide grin spread across Naruto's face. "Now we were playing ninja. Do you want to join us?" A dark figure occupied his seat behind a wooden desk, under the roots of Konoha, deep under the city's pulsing surface, deeper than the sewers or the hidden and already forgotten catacombs of the ancient old city. The man was tense beyond words, tense because he was making a decision. His eyes were narrowed and locked onto the darkness of a corner in front of him, while the gears in his brain were moving and calculating. Then suddenly he found his answer. With one flick of his hand, an ANBU appeared from somewhere in the shadows in front of the desk to land in a crouch. "Danzo-sama. Tell Crow that I have a new mission for him." The soldier nodded and disappeared in an instant. The room was silent, only the man's soft breathing left behind some noise. However, he wasn't alone as another voice filled the room in the next second. "You've made the right decision. I'll seek you out again soon." A candle flickered, and for a short moment, no longer than a heartbeat, the light revealed another form in the dark corner. A mismatched face. One emerald eye on perfect smooth white skin, while the other part of the face looked like carved wood, or the roots of an ancient old tree. But not the living and pulsing wood, it was pale and looked more like death than an actual corpse. A satisfied smirk flickered on the face of the being, revealing a set of razor-sharp shark-like teeth for a brief moment, before the thing simply sank back into the wall behind him. Thanks for watching, Shinobi Squad. If you enjoyed this what if, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next twist. Drop your theories in the comments, I'm always reading. Want more Naruto heat? Check out the other videos on the channel. Stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember even shadow clones need love. Peace out, Shinobi!